The rise and fall of the second Trump Reich. Tick-tock, tick-tock. Every incident that I mentioned in this article is based on an actual statement or action by Donald Trump, the people closely surrounding him, or something Trump has praised about his role model, Viktor Orban, the dictator of Hungary. So it was a hell of a year, 2025, the first year of the Trump Reich, or the First Reich, as Democrats refer to it, or the New America, as Trump refers to it. His slogan, one people, one nation, one leader. He has now declared himself president for life. He tells us America is now truly great. It all started with the election of November 2024, when the No Labels candidacy of Larry Hogan and Joe Manchin pulled enough electoral votes away from Trump and Biden, even though Biden was 10 million votes ahead of Trump, that none of those three tickets hit the 270 votes necessary to win the Electoral College. As a result, the election was thrown into the House of Representatives, and there are 26 Republican-controlled congressional delegations, and so on a 26-24 vote, the House of Representatives voted Donald Trump into office as president. At his swearing in, he promised to be a dictator for the day and pardoned himself, pardoned all the Republicans who were in Congress back on January 2021, and helped to organize and support the attack on the Capitol, and all the seditionists, the January 6th seditionists, let them out of jail. He then announced that the 24 Democrats leading their congressional delegations who'd voted against him in the House were guilty of sedition against the United States, and each was arrested and taken into custody. The arrests of those Democratic members of the House and a handful of Democratic senators from red states gave the Republicans a majority in the House and Senate, even though Democrats had won both bodies in the election. Jim Jordan became the new Speaker of the House, McConnell's job. And the next day, Donald Trump signed a new version of Schedule F, his changes to the civil service law, firing 50,000 federal employees. This is the day after he was inaugurated, firing 50,000 federal employees, including in the Department of Defense. All of those people were replaced within a day or two because a billionaire-friendly think tank, supported by billionaires, had come up with a bunch of billionaire-friendly candidates. They just rolled them in. Within a week, another series of political arrests took place as Joe and Hunter Biden, Liz Cheney, Merrick Garland, Jack Smith, Brad Raffensperger, Letitia James, and multiple other federal and state judges and prosecutors were arrested for conspiracy and alleged RICO violations. President Trump said, "America will never again tolerate lawlessness by its elected and appointed officials." He announced this in a primetime message to the country, and both the media and the Republican politicians were quick to point out that Andrew Jackson and Abraham Lincoln did worse than Trump had done. Abraham Lincoln suspended habeas corpus. Andrew Jackson ignored the Supreme Court. Meanwhile, the Supreme Court in a 6-3 ruling declared hate crimes unconstitutional, calling them thought crimes, with Justice Sam Alito saying, "We'll never allow America to become the dystopian nanny state characterized in the writings of Orwell or Lewis and craved by Democrats." So within hours of their announcement, the Supreme Court's announcement that there's no more hate crimes in America, over 200 people, most queer or black, lay dead across the United States. Trump went on TV to calm the nation, again saying there are very fine people on both sides. That weekend, hundreds of thousands of Americans poured into the streets to protest. Trump called another press conference and declared a state of emergency provoked by what he calls a nationwide insurrection. Tens of thousands of Army troops met the crowds in the streets, and in 11 cities and a half dozen rural areas used live ammunition to kill several dozen protesters. Joy Reid began her Monday MSNBC show following that weekend with the song "4 Dead in Ohio" and was arrested on air for inciting further insurrection. Trump then referred her network, its executives, and several of its hosts to the FCC for investigation, as he had promised to do last year. CNN throws in with Trump joining Fox and the big three national networks, explaining to America how Trump's changes are actually far less draconian than things previous presidents, particularly Lincoln, had done. Trump again invoked the Patriot Act to continue to hold the hundreds of elected and appointed Democratic officials, thugs, and sedition ringleaders in secret detention center without access to lawyers or other due process. The media pointed out this is nothing unusual. Bush and Cheney did the same thing hundreds of times, and some of their victims are even still in Gitmo without ever having a legitimate day in court. Nobody, the media said, of any real stature objected. Given the large number of people coming under detention as protests spread across the country, Trump signed an executive order transferring billions out of the military budget so that Halliburton and 2 other private prison contractors could build detention centers where bad people could be concentrated in one place. The media refuses to call them concentration camps because that's a prejudicial phrase. Trump then ordered the Pentagon to withdraw all forms of assistance from Ukraine, including military and diplomatic support. He said, Putin is merely liberating Ukraine from the Nazis that took it over when they stole the election from Yanukovych. They never should have turned their back on their Slavic partner, the nation that birthed them. And then he ended the speech with his campaign slogan from 2024 election, blood and soil. In an executive order titled No More S-Hole Countries, he outlawed all immigration and banned all tourist visas from Muslim and majority black countries, except for those from Saudi Arabia and Oman, where they are building a $5 billion Trump Tower as we speak. That was started in July of last year, by the way. This is true. Republicans in the House and Senate passed emergency legislation ending all U.S. gun restrictions with a single exception. Anybody who's been arrested or credibly accused of sedition and not pardoned can no longer own a weapon of any sort. Attorney General Jeffrey Clark then declared anybody who's ever joined the Democratic Party or voted for a Democrat in the past decade is now considered credibly accused of sedition and can no longer own weapons. Congress followed that up with billions to hire at least 1 million new local and state police, as Trump announced he's integrating the Proud Boys into the federal military, calling them the Storm Front, a shout out to QAnon. That was January. February of 2025. In the first week of the month, the Supreme Court handed down its 6-3 decision in Loper-Bright, gutting every federal protective regulatory agency. Trump immediately fires most of the employees of the EPA and the Department of the Interior, promising to sell all federally owned public lands. Disney and Comcast then submit bids to buy and manage Yellowstone. Congress then declares the Medicare experiment is over because more than half of seniors have voted with their feet, and they end the program, mandating all people over 65 must buy an Advantage plan from one of a handful of approved insurance giants. Following on that, Congress rolled out Social Security Advantage, a program that will, over the next decade, privatize all Social Security accounts via J.P. Morgan Chase, Wells Fargo, and the Bank of America. Proclaiming America will no longer use her tax dollars to support blue state communists and keeping a 2023 campaign promise, Trump ordered all military bases closed in any state with a Democratic seditionist governor or seditionist-controlled legislature. He gave states 60 days to change the composition of their governments. All who didn't comply are now seeing their facilities and jobs moved to red states. Congress then passed legislation closely resembling Putin's laws in Russia and Orban's in Hungary, declaring homosexuality and transsexuality deviant behaviors subject to federal penalties, fulfilling his 2022 campaign promise to pass two genders legislation. The fake news media is a major crisis, Trump told the nation from a press scrum near his helicopter. The solution, he said, would be straightforward. Congress voted later that day to rewrite the nation's libel laws, as Orban did in Hungary and Putin did in Russia, so that any journalist or commentary who sullies the reputation of any elected official can be subjected to both civil and criminal penalties. Within 3 weeks of that legislation being signed into law at the end of February, hundreds of writers and TV commentators have either been arrested or bankrupted as newsrooms across the nation purged themselves of anti-American voices. That would be anti-Trump voices. Proud Boys, now licensed by 6 Republicans on the Supreme Court and integrated into the military, began organized attacks on black neighborhoods, gay bars, and libraries. Dozens of people died, touching off riots in several cities, particularly Portland and Seattle, that were covered breathlessly by Fox so-called news. Trump pointed to the unrest and announced a second round of billion-dollar contracts for Halliburton to build camps for bad people, including those guilty of libel, violating gender conformity laws, or poisoning the blood of America through biracial marriages or giving shelter to illegal immigrants. In a major law and order speech, Trump declared homelessness a federal crime, and work camps were set up inside the new concentration camps for homeless people to learn skills so work can make them free. Arbeit macht frei. Volunteer Proud Boy units were dispatched to help police departments round up those who insisted on living in the streets. Based on the Comstock Act, which is still law but hasn't been enforced since the 1950s, The Republicans on the Supreme Court outlawed mifepristone and all hormonal birth control, along with IUDs and condoms. Republicans passed legislation declaring that life begins at conception. U.S. attorneys have started charging women who get abortions in blue states over the past year with murder. The Attorney General announced that all miscarriages must be reported to local police for investigation. And in the last week of February, Russia launched a final assault on Ukraine with the aid of their new Freedom Bloc allies, China, Iran, and North Korea. Ukraine fell, and Trump hailed a new era of world peace. So that's January and February. I've got, March and April and May. I mean, it just continues. But it's all, like I said, this is all based on things Trump has said he's going to do. And I think you'll find it fascinating, including a war with Mexico. I wrote that into here. And the wars in Europe, Australia, the Democratic Party being officially banned as insurrectionists. All these things that Trump and the people around him have suggested. You can read all about it over at HartmannReport.com. We'll be right back. In addition to bringing you the Thom Hartmann Program here on Free Speech TV and Video Media Online, we also have a whole set of ways you can interact with us and tools you can use to spread the word about the importance of democracy and the threats to it in our republic. First, there's your daily homework. Sue Nethercutt puts together a daily email newsletter that has a link to every story I discuss on the air, so you can find my sources and you can share them with your friends. It's free, and you can sign up at ThomHartmann.com. Second, I publish my daily take every day over at the HartmannReport.com website. That's also free if you want the daily 5 days a week rant in your inbox. No ads either. Third, we have the podcasts. There's the free 1-hour version of our daily show that's advertising supported. You can find that wherever you get your podcasts normally. And then there's also the podcast of the entire 3-hour show with no advertisements, and that's available by subscription over at ThomHartmann.com. So check them all out at ThomHartmann.com and HartmannReport.com. It's the Thom Hartmann University Book Club. Today we're reading from Minority Leader, How to Lead from the Outside and Make Real Change by Stacey Abrams. This is from Chapter 1, although the introduction is fascinating too, where she talks about, Rhodes scholarships and stuff, but this is Chapter 1. I sit in a living room, a cozy space, warm in the early summer. I'm perched on the edge of a sofa next to Valerie, the home's owner, a lovely black woman in her late 40s. Across from us, seated close together on a wide settee meant for one, are her 2 children, a son and a daughter. Politicians rarely visit their streets, which are nestled in a poorer community in South Georgia. Valerie beams with pride that both her children are headed to college in the fall. David, 17, plans to study criminology. Maya, 18, her belly round with her first child, intends to become a middle school teacher. Both newly graduated from high school, Maya will give birth in mere weeks and begin college months later, an unwed teen mother. Her intended school is more than 3 hours north of her home, so her mother will raise her newborn baby while she starts her freshman year. Valerie speaks matter-of-factly about the coming challenge, raising a new child just as hers leaves the nest. Still, she is determined that both her children pursue college degrees that she never received. Maya, the mother-to-be, wonders how she'll do so far away from home and her baby. Yet in the next breath, she explains how college will be the best for her and her child. Their future success rests upon her. I've come to their home as part of my campaign for governor, so I asked Valerie what she expects of someone like me. What can I do to help make lives like hers better? In her soft voice, she replies, she just wants options for financial aid for her children. They will succeed, she says, if they can afford to stay in school. As I look around the modest home passed down through the generations,
I understand both the pride and the desperation tangled in her response. She got them through and has given them the tools to carve out better lives for themselves. We chat more about the worries she's lived with all those years, our discussion turning to the crime and poverty in their neighborhood. Then I ask Valerie what she wants. At first, all I get in response is a quizzical look to suggest I need to reconsider my bid for higher office. Or that suggests. I repeat, what do you want for you? What secret dream do you have for yourself? Her confused expression turns to one of surprise. I don't know, she tells me. I've been a cashier at the Piggly Wiggly for 20 years. You must want something, I probe, something you'd like to do for you? A daycare, she admits quietly. I'd like to start a daycare center for unwed mothers like my daughter, so more girls can finish school and pursue their dreams. But that ambition is beyond her. Her body language, her tone of voice, her averted gaze speak louder than her words. I press her, but she demurs with a smile. Let's just see what happens if you win the governor's job, she says. Valerie's house in South Georgia is not too different from the squat red brick house where I grew up on South Street in Gulfport, Mississippi. An oak tree grew out in our front yard, shadowing the front sidewalk, forbidding grass to grow beneath its shade. Pink azaleas bloomed each spring from bushes that flanked the front door. Our rented house and the other set close by teemed with children, all black, all working class. We played in our postage-stamped yards, make believing the fantastical, superhero exploits, cops and robbers. As we got older, we'd talk about moving to New Orleans or living in one of the mansions along the beachfront that lay less than 5 miles away, across the railroad tracks that ran in between our neighborhood and the more wealthy environs. We dreamed of more, while our parents' lives centered around survival and making it from paycheck to paycheck. Instinctively, we understood that more had to be possible, even if we didn't know what to do to get there. These imaginings, these desires, are the roots of ambition. As adults, like Valerie, we tend to edit our desires until they fit our construction of who we're supposed to become. In such a world, I wouldn't dare dream of running for higher office, for mayor or governor or president. At least for now, Valerie sees herself retiring in 20 more years from Piggly Wiggly as a cashier, rather than as a small business owner who helps the community raise its children. From our brief meeting, I could see she had the fire, albeit of a low burn, of a minority leader. She had ambition, she had vision, but she didn't have the faith, and understandably so. Whether we come from working class neighborhoods or grow up comfortably middle class, minorities rarely come of age explicitly thinking about what we want and how to get it. People already in power almost never have to think about whether they belong in the room, much less if they would be listened to once outside. These men, and they are usually men and typically white, do not have to grapple with low expectations based on gender or race or class. Ambition for them begins with reminiscences of old times and older friendships or newer alliances. The ends have already been decided. Only the means are to be discussed. Most potential minority leaders feel the same lack of faith Valerie had, at least at some point in their evolution. We may not know how to get the first job, let alone make it to the big chair. We don't know how to take the leap from accepting our fates to actually changing them, and not just a little, but radically. Then there are those who simply don't know what they want. The drive to achieve burns inside, often without a clear target. We want to be something, but what that is remains hazy. Often we cannot articulate our goals because they lie just beyond the reach of who we're supposed to be. Ambition's scale is irrelevant. What holds us back is not scope, it's fear. And because we don't know what to call our dreams, don't know how to make them happen, or are pretty sure we'll be disappointed, we just stand still. But becoming a minority leader demands that we embrace ambition as our due. Stacey Abrams.
The Thom Hartmann Program.
Hey, happy Thursday. A lot going on in the world today. Donald Trump is, well, he says he's going to testify. I don't know. We'll see. He's at the E. Jean Carroll defamation. He redefamed her 30 some odd times overnight. I'll keep you up to date on that as it goes along. It's in progress as we speak. Also, can you deprogram your Trump cultist friends and family? And is the Trump spell broken? We'll talk about those things. And an Alabama execution. This is not how a country should morally behave, especially one that calls itself moral and says it has, you know, Judeo-Christian foundations and all that kind of thing. The second hour of our program, Congresswoman Pramila Jayapal, the chair of the Congressional Progressive Caucus, will be with us for the entire hour, taking your calls. That's the second hour of the program. And the third hour of our program, we're going to start with Phil Ittner from Ukraine with an update on what's going on there. And I've got an ADHD story. Do you have filing systems or piling systems? We'll tell you about that. By the way, just a couple of other small things that I wanted to point out to you. Number one, the numbers just came in. The U.S. economy grew in the last quarter at 3.3%. This is astonishing. Everybody was expecting 1%, maybe 1.2%, 1.3%. Instead, although the third quarter was 4.9%, which was huge, that was still like, uh-oh, that could cause inflation. 3%, 3.3%, this is such a sweet spot. The evidence of a possible recession is fading. And the reason this is working, by the way, is because of the Inflation Reduction Act and the CHIPS Act and the infrastructure improvements. These three massive pieces of legislation that injected, over $1 trillion into the U.S. economy in ways that pump that money right down to the middle class, right down to working class people and the poor. And so they're spending that money, and that's stimulating the economy. It's an absolute complete repudiation of Reaganomics. And I think it's absolutely brilliant. Also, Susan Collins just came out and said that she will not endorse Donald Trump if he wins the nomination, which raises an interesting question that I just kind of wanted to put on your radar screen. The Supreme Court has this case about whether Trump can be on the ballot or not, whether he committed sedition. And the conventional wisdom right now is that they're going to say, no problem, he can be on the ballot. But there is an argument to be made that the 6 conservative justices on the Supreme Court might actually be best served by removing Trump from the ballot, by saying, yes, he committed sedition under the 14th Amendment. He cannot serve in public office, so he can't run, so we're going to take him off the ballot. Because it does a couple of things. Number one, it establishes their bona fides as independent. Up until this point, everybody's like, oh, yeah, they're just toadies for Trump and the MAGA movement. So, it would help their reputation, at least in some circles. Number two, taking Trump off the ballot radically increases the chances that the Republican Party will beat Joe Biden. Nikki Haley has a better chance of beating Joe Biden than Donald Trump. So, they would be doing the Republican Party a favor, which, of course, they're doing. And, but number three, it would give a little more juice to their this BS theory of originalism, that we can read the minds of the founders, and textualism. We're just going to go with the actual words. So, some thoughts. My op-ed today over at HartmannReport.com is titled, Can You Deprogram Your Trump Cultist Friends and Family? And this is, what got me started on this. Yesterday, Keno called in. He's a regular caller of ours down in Lakeland, Florida. He's been listening for years. Started out as a Republican caller, in fact, and was for years. He was, one of our friendly Republicans who would call up and we'd have conversations about policy and stuff. And now he's a little concerned about Donald Trump. And he said that, he's got, I believe, a brother and sister, is my recollection, who are, in the Trump cult. And what do I do? So when I got off the air yesterday, I sat down and thought, hey, what do you do? And I spent a considerable amount of time doing research on this thing. In fact, if you click on any of the hot links in the article over at Hartmann Report, this Can You Deprogram Your Trump Cultist Friends and Family article, you'll find all these studies. I mean, I found probably 60 or 70 studies on authoritarianism. And what it is, where it comes from, how it affects people. Authoritarian followers, they've got all these personality characteristics that just kind of work with the right wing. And so, the bottom line is that we've got this 20% of Americans, roughly, who are authoritarian followers. They just want Big Daddy to take care of them. And I say Big Daddy very specifically. George Lakoff has been talking about this for years now, that the Republican Party is operating along the lines of a strict father family model. Daddy knows best, father knows best, right? And the Democratic Party has been operating along the lines of the nurturing family. We are a family together and we support each other model. And authoritarian followers very much want Big Daddy. They want that strict father. They want a strict father who is so strong to make them feel safe because they feel frightened and weak, who is so strong that he can even defy authority. Roughly half of Republicans answered yes to a statement, this was a couple of years ago, that they think they would support a candidate who was willing to break the rules in order to get things done. This is classic authoritarian follower stuff. And so, you know, while people may have policy reasons for supporting Trump, you know, they're racist or they want to be a billionaire when they grow up, or they're very, very wealthy or something like that. By and large, I think the vast majority of people who support Trump and this Republican cult, basically, are just authoritarian followers. They're people who were literally born that way. They were born, or at least half of this disposition is temperamental. It has to do with the way we're born. And they actually did, one of the studies I found yesterday that was most fascinating was identical versus fraternal twins. And what they found was that among identical twins, when the one twin was an authoritarian follower, the other twin was almost always an authoritarian follower. Whereas among fraternal twins who don't have identical DNA, one twin could be an authoritarian follower and the other one could not. And in fact, that was more commonly the situation, because only about 20% of us are authoritarian followers. Authoritarian followers are super vulnerable, super susceptible to anything that frightens them. And this is why, you know, billionaire-owned Fox News, I mean, this is what the right-wing billionaires in America know and what they've been doing. They're using fear to motivate people. This is why Fox News, run by, you know, a right-wing billionaire family, is constantly hysterical about, oh my God, there's an invasion of brown-skinned people coming into America. And there's riots by Black Lives Matter people. And there's hordes of homeless people and Antifa. This is why billionaire-funded groups with words like moms and liberty and freedom in their names are trying to scare the hell out of white parents, telling them that queer and black people are trying to recruit and groom their children or steal their savings through reparations. This is why the Republican Party relentlessly claims that Democrats are stealing elections through nefarious means, thus explaining Republican losses, but also providing a nice rationalization for legislation that makes it harder for average working people to vote. And, you know, the side effect of all of this Republican fear is that it actually increases the number of authoritarian followers in our society. Because, you know, people are kind of like on this borderline, and when they feel like they're under attack, or they feel like their society or country is under attack, they're more likely to become authoritarian followers. This followed 9/11 here. It followed the train bombing in 2004 in Spain. Good studies on those things, too. So what do we do about this? Well, my suggestion, and again, I did a deep dive into the research on how to deprogram cult members, and my first suggestion is think of your Trump-humping friends as cult members. Not as political enemies, not as, you know, misguided or whatever, but as literally as cult members, because they are. This is a cult. It's a cult that's been very, very carefully, you know, cultivated over the years. And so how do you deprogram cult members? Well, the first thing you do is you don't challenge them right up about being in a cult. You instead try to build bridges to them. We are all members of multiple tribes, right? Your family, your religion, your region, the schools you went to, the sports teams you support, your political affiliation. These are all areas where we can behave tribally. And so one of the best things to do is to identify those areas where the person you're talking to, the Trump humper you're talking to, actually shares a tribal identity with you. You know, hey, we're both Christians, or we're both Jews, or we're both, you know, we both support the football team, or we're both proud to be citizens of this state, whatever it may be, right? We're both parents. And then instead of making assertions, ask questions. One of the key assumptions of NLP, and there's only one paragraph about this in my article, but one of these days I'm going to write a whole piece on this. One of the core assumptions of neurolinguistic programming that, you know, we're doing courses on over at wisdomschool.org. One of the core assumptions is that all behavior has a positive motivation. Even Jeffrey Dahmer, all behavior, it may be weird and twisted and deeply buried, but at some level, deep down inside, everything everybody does is because they think it's the best thing to do. So the challenge that you have when you're talking to your Trump-humping friends and relatives and family and whatnot is to ask them questions that will elicit that positive outcome that they're trying to achieve by following Trump or following the Republican Party, or going along, you know, or watching Fox News all day long. And then you'll probably have a common basis because, you know, everybody wants a positive outcome, right? So, you know, there's some suggested questions there. The other thing is, if you're going to have to discuss Trump, don't talk about him being a fascist or a strong guy, because that's what they want. Remember, these are frightened people who want Big Daddy. Instead, talk about him being weak. Talk about him being frightened by immigrants, terrified of going to prison, constantly stealing from people, lying to and cheating on everyone, stealing from kids with cancer, subservient to Putin, bowing to the Saudi dictators who give his family billions of dollars. Characterize him as weak and fumbling, and you'll have more success in breaking that bond between those people. We'll be right back.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
18 minutes past the hours. The Trump spell broken and the Alabama execution. Stay with us. We'll talk about these things in just a second. And welcome back. Ziggy and Oni out of New York. Hey, Ziggy, what's up? What's on your mind?
Hey, Tom. I thought I'd call to get a little Viagra for my mind without making it stiff.
That joke was funnier back when Rush Limbaugh was around, because after he got busted with Viagra. But anyway, so what's up, Ziggy?
All right. Yeah, I like it. A good line. I want to give you a report from the front lines of the medical system. Mm-hmm. Over the past weekend, I spent it in the hospital.
Oh, no.
And my outcome was decent. You know, I'm not going to say it was enjoyable, but I have Medicare, and every time there was a situation or a problem, whatever, we made a decision. I was the key decider, and we went ahead with it, you know, and I'm out of the hospital now. I still have to go back and get checked for a few things. And one thing I did observe, though, is a number of people become frustrated because the doctors in the hospitals many times had to wait for either Medicare Advantage or their insurance company to qualify them for whatever procedure they wanted to do.
So these were your fellow hospital patients who didn't have the luxury of having real Medicare. They had Medicare Advantage instead, so they were being screwed by their insurers.
Yes, exactly. Where, you know, I got mine done right away. They would have to wait for a little while. And I have one story in particular. The fellow in the bed next to me, he's 88 years old, on Medicare Advantage. He had gone about a day and a half without any food or water. The doctors wanted to operate, and they expected the insurance company to, you know, do it, you know, release it right away, and it didn't occur. So they didn't dare to give him food or water because when they got the okay, they wanted to go ahead and operate. You know, so I said, that poor fellow, I felt so sorry for him, but, you know, what else could I do? You know what I mean? Yeah. And I kind of talked to the doctors a little bit about it, and they basically said, you know, if it was critical, we would do it right now, irregardless, but, you know, we don't do any favor to our patients if we send them home with a large bill that we know we can avoid.
Right.
And, you know, I said, I can understand that. So, I just thought that was interesting and, forewarned people that be on Medicare, not Medicare Advantage.
So when you shared your insight and your experience about the difference between real Medicare and this BS scam called Medicare Advantage,
right.
How did people respond? I mean, these people who were being screwed by their insurance companies, did they have a sudden light bulb moment, or did they try to defend the insurance company?
I didn't try to convince them, other than the fact of stating that there was no problem with it. Mainly because of the fact that they were frustrated and upset with the doctors in the hospital when they really weren't the ones at fault. And there really wasn't a way to communicate with them during those situations,
sure,
about what was going on with me. But other than the fact that I was able to get it done because I had regular Medicare.
Yeah.
So actually, I didn't get in a great discussion with people on that point as far as other patients.
This is what I keep telling people. They're like, hey, I got a free gym membership. I've got a $100 a month food card, with my Medicare Advantage. And I'm like, wait until you're in the hospital.
Right.
You're going to be missing a few things.
Quick thing, Tom.
Yeah.
I put my cardiac report into AI and have it explain to me what it said, and it worked out great.
Huh, fascinating. Okay, well, I hope you're feeling better, Ziggy, and that everything turns out well. Thanks a lot for the call.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, good talking to you. 22 minutes past the hour. We'll be right back. Change starts with you. You can be calling your Democratic or Republican representatives to let them know what you think by calling 202-224-3121. It's the Capitol switchboard. It'll get you right through to them. So MAGA Mike and the Republicans want a religious test for people running for public office. They want to know that you are sufficiently Christian to be worthy of being elected. Right. MAGA Mike is one of these 7 mountain evangelicals. There are 7 domains where these dominionists believe that we need to have religion completely take them over. Education, religion, family, business, government and military, arts and entertainment, and the media. Seriously. This is not what Jesus was preaching when he said, give unto Caesar what is Caesar and unto God what is God's. This is the opposite, in fact, of what Jesus was teaching. It's the opposite of Matthew 25, where Jesus said the only way to get to heaven is by feeding the hungry, healing the sick, helping the poor. This is counter-Christian, anti-Christian, in fact. In fact, I think you could say it is the Antichrist's work. There's a piece about it over at HartmannReport.com. Check it out. Welcome back. So is the Trump spell broken? I don't know. Donald Trump obsessively, turns out it was more than 40 times. When they were talking about it this morning on Morning Joe, Joe Scarborough was saying, we're talking about a guy still attacking this woman that the judge said he raped. It's unbelievable. And Willie Geist says his brilliant legal strategy is to be up all night posting 37 times going after E. Jean Carroll. Mika says, very obsessive. Yeah, you think so? And now you've got Susan Collins, who has come out and said, if Trump gets the nomination, I am not going to endorse him. I don't think this is over, folks. I mean, I've been thinking, after the New Hampshire primary, I was thinking, okay, Trump's got this locked up. But he's acting weirder and weirder on the one hand. On the other hand, he has stopped the United States Senate from sending aid to Ukraine. He's still, Donald Trump is still wholly owned by Vladimir Putin, has been since the 1980s. And, he's succeeded in doing that so far. We'll talk with Phil Ittner about that in the next hour, and we'll talk with Pramila Jayapal about that as well, but we'll see. Meanwhile, down in Alabama, the state tried to kill this guy, Kenneth Smith. He was a low-rent hitman, right? This pastor paid him $1,000 to kill the pastor's wife. And, that's a whole long story. But anyhow, he was convicted of the murder, and they tried to execute him with a lethal injection, and they couldn't find a vein. And so now they're going to put a mask over his face and fill the mask with nitrogen gas, which will cause him to experience suffocation. I don't understand why they don't just give people an overdose, I mean, fentanyl, for example. You know, it's so deadly. We all know this, how deadly it is. And when people overdose on narcotics, they just fall asleep. They don't, yes, their body may spasm a few times, weird stuff may happen, but they're all unconscious when all that happens. Or barbiturates, Seconal and phenobarbital. I mean, that's what they use to put down dogs and cats. They just give them an overdose of barbiturates and they literally just go to sleep, and then, you give them a little bit more and their heart stops. Why don't, if we have to kill people, but I don't think we have to kill people. I mean, that's the other part of this. It's just outrageous that as a nation that our tax dollars are being used to kill people. It's barbaric. I lack a better word. Anyway, we'll pick up your calls on the other side of the break. Stay tuned. It's the Thom Hartmann Program, fair and only slightly unbalanced.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
I will be right back with your calls. Our book today in the Thom Hartmann Book Club is Unsettling Truths, the ongoing dehumanizing legacy of the doctrine of discovery by Mark Charles and Soon Chan Ra. This is from chapter 1. You cannot discover lands that are already inhabited. I, Mark, said this almost under my breath as I walked past a line of men dressed as Spanish sailors from the 1490s. I was in front of Union Station in Washington, D.C., near the massive statue of Christopher Columbus overlooking the United States Capitol. Every Columbus Day, there's an official ceremony in this plaza honoring Columbus as the discoverer of America. I had stumbled upon this ceremony by accident the year prior. There were a few non-natives holding signs and protesting the ceremony, but nothing very disruptive. I went back the following year primarily out of curiosity. I wasn't intending to protest, nor did I want to make a scene. As I walked up behind the statue and approached the group of men dressed as Spanish sailors, the words just came out of my mouth. You cannot discover lands already inhabited. As I walked further down the line, I said it again, this time a little louder. You cannot discover lands already inhabited. As I continued walking, I came to the front of the line where a group of men dressed in suits were standing. I repeated myself, making sure they could hear me. You cannot discover lands already inhabited. Suck it up, was the reply I heard as I kept walking. By this time, I'd walked around the statue and reached the front where a small stage had been erected and chairs set up for people to watch the ceremony. It hadn't started yet, but more than half the audience was seated waiting for it to begin. So I stopped near the center, turned toward the crowd, and in a calm but loud voice I said to the people, you cannot discover lands already inhabited. That process is known as stealing, conquering, or colonizing. The fact that America calls what Columbus did discovery reveals the implicit racial bias of the country, that Native Americans are not fully human. Quickly, one of the white men dressed in a suit walked over and interrupted me. You are not welcome here, he said as he grabbed my arm and began walking me away. I attempted to explain the inappropriateness of both celebrating this holiday as well as hosting this ceremony, but instead of engaging in conversation, he threatened me with arrest and escorted me from the area. As I walked away from the gathering, I was amused at his words and the irony of their context. A white man participating in a public ceremony honoring Christopher Columbus as the discoverer of America, telling a native man he was not welcome in that space. How did a flawed assumption about the place of the indigenous population in U.S. society become normative? How are assumptions so deeply ingrained in the American psyche and imagination that dysfunctional and oppressive actions emerge? How did a dysfunctional idea and worldview form that allows for the displacement of native bodies? One of the explanations for the formation of this dysfunctional worldview is the doctrine of discovery. The doctrine of discovery is a set of legal principles that govern the European colonizing powers, particularly during the administration of indigenous land, regarding the administration. It is the primary legal precedent that still controls native affairs and rights, and international law formulated in the 15th and 16th centuries.
From a theological perspective, the legal and political role of the doctrine of discovery is rooted in a dysfunctional theological imagination that shaped the European colonial settler worldview. The doctrine emerged from a series of 15th century papal bulls, which are official decrees by the Pope that carry the full weight of his ecclesiastical office. On June 18, 1452, Pope Nicholas V issued the papal bull Dum Diversus, which initiated the first set of documents that would compose the doctrine of discovery. The official decree of the Pope granted permission to King Alfonso V of Portugal, quote, to invade, search out, capture, vanquish, and subdue all Saracens, Muslims, and pagans whatsoever, and other enemies of Christ wheresoever placed, and the kingdoms, dukedoms, principalities, dominions, possessions, and all movable and immovable goods whatsoever, held and possessed by them, and to reduce their persons to perpetual slavery, and to apply and appropriate to himself and his successors the kingdoms, dukedoms, counties, principalities, dominions, possessions, and goods, and to convert them to his or their use and profit. End of quote from Pope Nicholas's papal bull of 1452. Dum Diversus would identify the Saracens, a common term for Muslims at the time, and pagans, essentially identifying any non-Christians as others, as those who could be targeted for, quote, perpetual slavery. The papal bull intentionally used language that identified those outside the European Christian world and enforced the Western theological imagination of non-Europeans as other. The Portuguese took these ecclesiastical statements to heart and perpetrated the slave trade from the African continent to the European and the American continents. As a Christian ruler, the King of Portugal would have power endowed from the church to take possession of the other as slave labor from the continent of Africa. The pagan African body was just another commodity to be taken for the pleasure and profit of the European Christian body, the one made most fully in the image of God. In the January of 1454, Pope Nicholas authored another bull. The book is Unsettling Truths by Charles and Ra.
Did you know that every weekday we send out an email before the show giving you all the topics coming up so you can be fully informed and ready to interact with our program? Or that after the show we send out Sue's Stack, a list of every topic I've discussed along with clickable hot links to every source of information I've shared with you on the air? It's all completely free and available over at thom.tv, THOM.tv. Check it out. Well, the big story that's all over the media right now is how Mitch McConnell and several others have basically come out and said, yeah, you know, Trump wants Putin to win in Ukraine, and so he's screwing with this aid program for aid to Ukraine, to Israel, and to strengthen our southern border. I've been saying this for, what, a week and a half, 2 weeks, maybe longer, that this is exactly what's going to happen, that Trump will not tolerate money going to Ukraine if he can do anything about it, and he can now, because Putin owns Trump. But, you know, I guess the media is just figuring this out. And weirdly, none of them are talking about Putin owning Trump or Trump doing this to help Putin. They're all talking about it like, hey, you know, Trump is screwing things up, wonder why. Isn't it obvious? All right, let's pick up your calls here. Roya in Los Angeles. Hey, Roya, what's on your mind today?
Hey, good morning. How are you, Tom?
I'm great. How are you today?
Good, good. I was just calling because I'm telling you, I think Nikki Haley's going to give him a run for his money, and she's gonna like scare him into a corner, and he's gonna get weirder and weirder, and he's gonna like start spewing a bunch of other crap.
It's starting to look like that, or sound like that, or feel like that. I mean, absolutely.
I'm telling you, bro, in my gut feeling, she's going to be the thorn on his side. It's going to make him go cuckoo.
Yeah, yeah. And you know, on the one hand, if Trump is the nominee, I think he'll be fairly easy for Biden to beat. On the other hand, if Haley is the nominee, Trump is going to be throwing stones at her. You know, I mean, he's not going to let that slide.
You know? What I see is that Mitchy Mitch, and the rest of the Mitt Romney, those kind of crew, and the Liz Cheneys, they're not going to let this bad orange man get near the White House again.
Yeah.
I'm telling you, there's going to be some shit. Some things going on behind the scenes that we don't know about. That's gonna, he's not gonna make it in there. I'm telling you.
Yeah.
He's not going to be the nominee.
We'll see, Roy. It's going to get interesting. What's the old saying? Elect a clown or expect a circus. Here it is. Thank you. Good talking to you, Sean in Stamford, Connecticut. Hey, Sean, what's on your mind today?
Well, I'll tell you. You were talking about the cult a minute ago, and there's one other aspect you neglected to mention, and that is the power of the megachurch and their not-for-profit status and how they use that for influence. Mm-hmm. So when they do that, they say, okay, you must vote the way God wants you to vote, and that is to vote for Trump, because he is our leader.
Right. No, and then Mike Flynn's got this tour. He's going all around the country right now, speaking to evangelical groups, basically saying what you just said. I get that. So what is your, therefore what? Therefore, we should be talking about religion to these people, or
no? We should
they're unredeemable.
Because of this sickness, we have to find another way around to deprogram them, as you would say. The other thing that we also have to take into consideration is something that you mentioned yesterday about the influence from Russia and how our politicians as well. It all goes back to one and the same. There's a lot of international intrigue going on that it crosses so many borders. We don't even know they have it yet.
Yeah. Well, and about half the Republicans who went to Moscow in 2018, on July 4th, 2018, for the 4th of July, are the guys who are now coming out here saying, we're not going to pass this Ukraine deal. I'm wondering if they, ended up with a hooker in their bedroom or something like that. I mean, this is what the Republican member of Congress was speculating yesterday that I shared with you. So, we'll see. We'll see. But it's getting weird. Sean, thank you. Carmen in Philadelphia. Hey, Carmen, what's on your mind today?
Hi, Tom.
Hey.
Earlier, you mentioned something about some sort of research that you had read about twins.
It was the study on authoritarianism, how much of it is born and how much of it is the result of environmental circumstances. And what they found was that identical twins who have identical DNA, if one is authoritarian, the other one is almost always authoritarian. Whereas fraternal twins, where they have different DNA, they're basically brother and sister, or two brothers, two sisters. If one is authoritarian, the other one is more likely not to be an authoritarian, which suggests a really strong genetic component to it. Yes.
Okay. Well, Tom, guess what? I am an identical twin. Mm-hmm. My sister and I are as different as night and day.
Oh, you're the exception to the rule, then. That's interesting.
Yeah, my sister, I'm basically an introvert. Mm-hmm. My sister is more outgoing. Uh-huh. I try to be decent to people. My sister is very manipulative.
Interesting.
One married to Donald Trump.
Interesting.
Although I don't know her political stance. I don't know if she's for Trump or not. Yeah. I have no idea.
Yeah.
But this is the kind of dispute that not all identical twins think and will do the same things.
Yeah, you're right. They did find that some, with some identical twins, one was an authoritarian and the other wasn't, which demonstrates that there is an environmental variable here. It's right. Just what they were arguing, though, is that the environmental variable is probably only in the neighborhood of 30 to 50% of the factor, and the DNA variable is probably 50 to 70% of the factor. But nobody knows for sure. That's fascinating. Carmen, thank you. Thanks for sharing that story with us. A little personal anecdote there. Brandon in Monterey, California. Hey, Brandon, what's on your mind today? Brandon, watching us on YouTube in Monterey, California. Going once, going twice. Michael in Bronx, New York. Hey, Michael, what's on your mind today?
A whole lot, Tom. Hi.
Hey.
I found it intriguing what you were saying about the big daddy Daddy syndrome, and some people looking to Trump as the authoritarian, the dictator, and one that's
the father who will
Big
keep
Daddy.
them safe. The strict father who will keep them safe. Yes.
keep him safe, which to me is hogwash because the guy is nothing but destruction. He lies to everybody. He manipulates people. I keep telling and keep saying to people, he is using you for his own criminal stuff. And for one thing, he keeps saying it's a witch hunt. It's a witch hunt. I came up with a somewhat humor, but a big point. In fact, that he says it's a witch hunt. Splash him with some water. Let's see if he melts. If he does, which we know he will not, then it's a witch hunt. But, you know, I'm like, let's cut the crap on that.
Toss him in a pond and see if he floats.
Yeah, gee whiz.
There's
But
enough blubber
then
there. He would float. But anyway.
Well, my thing was, let's see if he melts. You know.
Yeah. That's
like
a little less fat shaming. Yeah, I totally get it.
But the whole thing is, he says that he's done a great job with COVID. Tom, I hope that you can take note of this, pass the word around, and everyone listening, just use it to debunk that claim. It is the biggest falsehood ever because Trump is the one that caused COVID to spread around.
Yeah.
Why? Because he took it upon himself to disband and discontinue the pandemic commission that was set up by Barack Obama, his predecessor.
You're right.
This is how we successfully
He shut down two of them. There was one within the CDC and there was one within the White House, and he shut them. And
he shut them both down. Yeah. This is how we curbed Ebola, and had they remained intact, we could have curbed COVID the same way.
That's why the Lancet, the British medical journal, found that at least 500,000 Americans who died didn't have to die, that they would not have died if Trump hadn't been denying the danger of COVID to the American public while he was admitting it to Bob Woodward. If Trump hadn't been talking masks, if Trump hadn't been trying to get people back to work because he was so worried about the economy, he thought it was going to hurt his re-election chances. It was all about me. It was all about Trump. Michael, excellent point. I'm sorry, I thought you were finished. Joanne in Cortez, Colorado. Hey, Joanne, what's on your mind today?
No, I'm not in Cortez anymore. I'm in Ocala, Florida.
Okay, let me fix that. So what's up?
Thank you for taking my call. I just wanted to say something about Medicare Advantage. I know better than to ever sign up for that. I'm a retired RN. My husband recently passed away in the hospital. I was not allowed to be with him, I think because the case manager had tried to inform us about Medicare Advantage and tell us that you can get a supplement with Medicare Advantage. And I explained to her, no, you cannot get a supplement with Medicare Advantage. And after that, she pretty much dissed me. She wouldn't talk to me.
Oh, my.
And I was trying to advocate for my husband, just to get him into hospice. He had end-stage COPD, and there was no reason that they kept him in the hospital other than to make money, in my opinion.
Oh, that's so sad. That's what my brother died of. I'm so sorry to hear that. Joanne, and for people who don't know what you're talking about, Joanne, Ziggy called earlier into the program if people didn't catch it. And he just got out of the hospital. And, you know, Ziggy's a regular caller to the program. And, you know, with his End Bribes website where he sells posters and things. And he was in the hospital, and he said that every procedure that he needed, he got immediately. And all the people around him who were on Medicare Advantage were having to wait. One guy had to wait a day and a half without food or water. Because they were waiting for the authorization from the insurance company to perform life-saving surgery on the guy. And the insurance company was dragging their feet. And because Ziggy had real Medicare, there was no pre-authorization necessary. And so everything that he needed, he got within minutes of the doctors saying, you need this or you need that. And, you know, it's just, it's remarkable.
Case manager should know that, and she shouldn't have been fighting with me over it. And I should have been allowed to be with him when he died. I was thrown out. I tried to call everybody I can think of, the state representatives, even the police, to try to get me back in. Finally, regular hospice got me in there, and he had passed away like 5 minutes prior to that.
Oh, I'm so sorry to hear that, John, or Joanne. Joanne, thank you for the call. I'm so sorry that you lost your husband. Thank you.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archives.
That's got to be so tough. It's 40. 6 minutes past the hour. We'll be right back. And welcome back. John in Poulsbo, Washington. Hey, John, what's on your mind today? Thanks for listening to KBCS.
Hey, Tom. Thanks a lot for taking my call again. We talked last week, and I wanted to first really say that I appreciate your show, and I appreciate that today you were talking about the need for some people in this country to have a benevolent king.
Right.
You know, a Trump.
Yep.
But Trump is not a benevolent person.
No, but they view it that way.
He's trying to be a king. And I really appreciate you talking about how you can talk to other people about the Trumpers, about how to cure their cult. You know, they're latching on to this cult. I mean, we talked about this last week a little bit, about the psychology Trump and the fear factor has in them following this. Mm-hmm. You know, and I really want to appreciate you. I mean, just one example, Trump in New Hampshire only got 54% of the vote, and Haley got 43%. I mean, that's pretty scary for the Trump people.
Yeah.
And pretty enlightening for the Haley people, I think. We're going to see in North Carolina just what that all means.
Yeah.
What do you think about that, Tom?
I think you're right. I think your analysis is right, John. North Carolina is going to be real interesting. It's going to be interesting also how they spin Nevada, because, you know, Nevada, the GOP changed their rules there. They're going back and forth between a caucus and an actual primary, and the result of that is going to be that it's kind of preordained that Nevada is going to go entirely for Trump. So whether the press takes that seriously, how that's dealt with, you know, that's going to, I guess. And then you've got, 2-3 weeks now from now, you know, South Carolina, and then, of course, you know, a couple weeks after that, Super Tuesday. I thought I could predict this stuff at one point, but I really think an awful lot of it is up in the air. I think Trump, you know, going nuts here at the E. Jean Carroll trial, I don't think that that's doing him any favors. I think that, you know, increasingly people are seeing him as deranged. The day before yesterday, he had makeup on so dark that it looked like he was trying to go blackface. I mean, Drudge had a picture of it, called it his face shoe leather. He's losing it, I think. I think he's just, you know, you know, whether that's going to mean that we've got a guy who's losing it, who's going to be, you know, the Republican nominee and running for president, or whether that's going to mean that the Republicans are going to get smart and you know, kick him off the ticket. But then, you know, like I said before, then you're going to have Trump going after whoever the nominee is. So I just don't see any happy ending here for the GOP, John. I just don't.
Yeah, because they want a king.
Yeah.
But they want a benevolent king.
Right, and there's basically no such thing.
Not a benevolent person. He has proved that over and over again with all the times that he's gone bankrupt. He could have gone for Chapter 11 and then cleaned up his mess and paid people off. Instead, he goes for Chapter 13.
Right.
And gets rid of all the debt and then just walks away.
Yeah.
You know,
and he did it 6 times.
Benevolent king? I mean, I don't think so.
Yeah, this guy.
In my head, anyway.
Yeah, this guy is not. You know, individual responsibility. Bankruptcy 6 times, really? Yeah, I'm with you, John. Thank you very much for the call, and thanks for listening to KBCS. It's 10 minutes before the hour. I'll be back with more of your calls in just a moment. Just a reminder: Pramila Jayapal, the chair of the Congressional Progressive Caucus, will be with us for the entire next hour, taking your calls. So Mark is putting calls on the board right now for that. We'll be right back, 10 minutes before the hour. Help support progressive radio. If you're listening to us on a commercial station, call their advertisers and let them know you're listening. If you're listening to us on Pacifica, one of our many nonprofit stations, please support them when they do their fundraising drives. Thanks for supporting Progressive Talk Radio, and tag you're it. So a lot of people are wondering, why is it in America that we can't have nice things? Why don't we have, the same things every other democracy has? Every other democracy in the world has a national health care system of some form, and everybody is covered. We don't. We've got 27 million uninsured people and over 100 million underinsured people. Why is that? Why is it that every other country in the world offers college education very inexpensively, if not for free, and for here you go to debt? Why is it that we've got our public schools crumbling and other countries are doing well? Why is it that we've got Medicare being taken apart by this Medicare Advantage scam and nobody will do anything about it? Well, it turns out the reason why it boils down to one thing, one Supreme Court decision, Citizens United, legalizing the bribery of our politicians. There's a whole rant about this over at HartmannReport.com. I think you're going to find it very, very useful. Check it out. 52 minutes past the hour. James in listening on WHNH in Concord, New Hampshire. Hey, James, what's on your mind today?
Hey, Tom. I don't get to listen to you on that station very often, but I listen to your podcast like the next day.
Oh, okay.
I've been listening for about 2 years now.
Well, thank you. So what's on your mind?
Heard it yesterday. Somebody made the comment that we should start labeling number 45. We should start changing his first name to Loser.
Yeah.
I think we need to retitle somebody else also. The Republican Party has shattered. We have Nikki Haley and other people like her going off in the Republican Party. And then on the other side, you've got a bunch of people who they don't want to govern. They just want to burn everything down, destroy everything that they can. As my grandmother used to say, cut off your nose to spite your face.
Yeah,
what do you call a person who wants to burn? What do you call a person who wants to burn everything down?
An arsonist.
That's what we should be calling Trump and everybody who follows him. It's not the Republican Party. It's the arsonist party.
Yeah, I'm with you. And this goes beyond, Barry Goldwater's 1964 shtick. Although I still think if Trump is the nominee, if the Republican nominee, we're going to see a kind of a replay of 64. But this goes beyond that because Barry Goldwater didn't want to burn everything down. He just was willing to have a nuclear war to prevent communism. He would have put the Vietnam War on steroids instantly. But it's a strange time, James. It really, really is. Thanks for sharing your perspective. Joe in Mocksville, North Carolina. Do I have that right, Joe?
Yes.
Hey, what's on your mind?
Hey, it's good, Doc. First time talking to you.
Thank you.
I think Trump has got the country right where he wants us.
How so?
And I think there's only one thing that he wants to do, or he wants more than to be reelected, and that's to stay out of jail.
Oh yeah.
And
keep his fortune.
Yeah, if he had it. Anyway, what he's doing is trying to convince everybody that he's crazy so he doesn't have to stand trial in any of this.
I don't think he's building an insanity defense here.
You don't?
No, I think he's genuinely crazy. I mean, what you see is what you get.
Well,
I don't think he's that strategic, Joe.
Well, he's got a pretty good start at it, then.
Yeah, there you go. Well, maybe he can plead insanity, but I don't think it's going to work for him. And I like I said, I don't think that's the direction he's going. I think what you're seeing is raw id. You're seeing the core of Donald Trump, which is this frightened little boy who was a bully his whole entire life, and suddenly his bully routine is only partly working. I mean, it looks like he's going to screw Ukraine and kill a few million people there, but his bully routine within the United States is starting to fade, and he's freaked out. I mean, Nikki Haley is bullying him back. Last night she was like, "Come on, Donald, bring it on." Poor little insecure Donald. I mean, this is the kind of stuff that just makes him crazy. And back to your point, Joe. Joe, thanks for weighing in. Good to hear from you. Matt in Portland, Oregon. Hey, Matt, what's up?
Hey, how's it going? I was wondering, here in Oregon, we passed a measure, I believe it was 114. It was like gun initiative.
Yeah.
It was like overwhelmingly supported. And then it's like some judge in a rural county was like, nope.
Yeah, put it on hold.
Rolled it down, and now it's over. I just don't understand how is that.
I didn't know that it was over. I thought it was still being adjudicated.
No, I mean, from my understanding is, like they struck it down.
I'll have to, I'm sorry, I don't follow Oregon politics as closely as I probably should since I live here. But I'll have to look that up, Matt. My understanding was that the judge put it on hold and that it's going to go before the state Supreme Court. And I don't think the state Supreme Court has ruled on it yet. Sean is trying to look it up as we speak.
Yeah,
it's been permanently blocked.
I mean,
permanently blocked. Oh, interesting. Huh.
Yeah, that's what I didn't understand. It's like if so many people voted for it, how can one, so many people in Multnomah County voted for it, and then you've got.
Well, I think the rationale was that because it takes away some people's guns, it was a violation of Sam Alito and Clarence Thomas and whatnot, their interpretation of the Second Amendment. And not just Heller. I mean, the more recent one, the one that Clarence Thomas authored, where he said that we have to go back to what the original writing of the founders and all this kind of stuff. So I don't know, man. I'll have to look into it. But thank you for the call. It was a great piece of legislation. I was a big supporter of it. And so anyway, up next, Pramila Jayapal, the chair of the Congressional Progressive Caucus, will be with us for the entire next hour, taking on your mind. Stay tuned.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
In addition to bringing you the Thom Hartmann Program here on Free Speech TV and Video Media Online, we also have a whole set of ways you can interact with us and tools you can use to spread the word about the importance of democracy and the threats to it in our republic. First, there's your daily homework. Sue Nethercutt puts together a daily email newsletter that has a link to every story I discuss on the air, so you can find my sources and you can share them with your friends. It's free and you can sign up at ThomHartmann.com. Second, I publish my daily take every day over at the HartmannReport.com website. That's also free if you want the daily 5 days a week rant in your inbox. No ads either. Third, we have the podcasts. There's the free 1-hour version of our daily show that's advertising supported. You can find that wherever you get your podcasts normally. And then there's also the podcast of the entire 3-hour show with no advertisements, and that's available by subscription over at ThomHartmann.com. So check them all out at ThomHartmann.com and HartmannReport.com.
We take life back!
Our book today in the Thom Hartmann Book Club is Common Sense for the 21st Century by Roger Hallam. The subtitle, Only Nonviolent Rebellion Can Now Stop Climate Breakdown and Social Collapse. This is from the foreword. I was there for the past 20 years. Climate activism. It didn't work. We protested in our hundreds of millions. It didn't work. We raised billions to reach people and politicians. It didn't work. We signed countless online petitions. They didn't work. We looked to the United Nations to resolve the crisis. It didn't work. We trusted progressive politicians and their reforms. That didn't work. Al Gore had a big concert and a PR campaign. It didn't work. Countless NGOs, non-governmental organizations, did their best, and it didn't work. I worked with green NGO campaigns, champagne environmentalists, and lying politicians. I was wasting my time. I had a clue back in 2007 that there might be a fundamental flaw with the reformist approach, the problem with the political influence of the industrial billionaires like the Koch brothers and other fossil fuel bosses. It was another warm night in Los Angeles. I was invited to an exclusive event. A Tesla Roadster prototype was going to be shown to press and guests. We took turns riding around the block. I watched in amazement as the Tesla was at the end of the street in the blink of an eye, with barely a sound. I felt like a caveman seeing a television. Incredible. While I was working on a campaign in 2007, I had an idea for how to save the world with a massive music event and a huge fundraising effort led by celebrities to fund the biggest PR campaign to save the environment. It would be a huge global event, just like Live Aid. I sought out a prominent journalist at the Tesla event to tell about my scheme and bask in the glory of his praise. The journalist was Vijay Vithswaram from The Economist, now a life member of this Council on Foreign Relations. After listening carefully to my concept, he smiled and laughed. I was stunned. Laughter? How could I be so wrong? Vijay wasn't being cruel or unkind. He thought I was naive. He said, "The fossil fuel industry has enough money to outspend any public relations campaign you might try by 100 times. He carried on talking, but I had stopped listening. I had my answer. He was right. Crestfallen, I sheepishly nodded and walked away. Over the next 12 years, I watched as fossil fuel companies used their vast financial capital to buy political parties, trick NGOs into fruitless schemes like the U.S. Cap and Trade Initiative, sow doubt about climate science in the public discourse, and slow policy reform to a snail's pace. Their strategy worked. As climate skepticism continued to spread, climate change mitigation dropped down voters' priorities. With Trump and Putin in power, it was over. I quit climate campaigning. Then I heard about Extinction Rebellion closing 5 bridges in London. Then they closed central London in April 2019. This was something different. I met Roger Hallam and he explained his ideas for a radical plan to create real change. This included, first, tell the truth. Climate skepticism was pushed by the mainstream media, which spread doubt on climate science like a plague, leaving inaction in its wake. The scale of the crisis is being played down, and we must get the truth out. Second, nonviolent civil disobedience. We need to get arrested, tens of thousands of us, more. No more protests, no more petitions. Instead, nonviolent civil disobedience, lots of it, and on a large scale. Close down cities until the politicians take action, or until the people do. Third, universalism. In other words, the ecological and climate crisis should not be owned by any political ideology, culture, age, or gender. As Roger Hallam says, we all have a stake in the future. We should all be allowed to engage in action. I was convinced. We need a new approach to save ourselves and the planet. We need to spark a worldwide rebellion. We need some common sense for the 21st century. That foreword was written by, quote, anonymous climate activist. So this now is the introduction to the book. It is time to grow up and see the world as it is. There are some things which are undeniably real. There are some things we cannot change, and one of those is the law of physics. Ice melts when the temperature increases. Crops die in a drought. Trees burn in forest fires. Because these things are real, we can also be certain about what the future holds. We are now heading into a period of extreme ecological collapse. Whether or not this leads to the extinction of the human species largely depends on whether revolutionary changes happen within our societies within the next decade. This is not a matter of ideology, but of simple math and physics. The United Nations has estimated that we need to reduce carbon emissions by half within a decade to have a 50% chance of avoiding a global catastrophe. Of course, this is likely to be an underestimate, as recent science shows permafrost melting 90 years earlier than forecasted, and Himalayan glaciers melting twice as fast as expected. The book, Common Sense for the 21st Century, by Roger Hallam, the co-founder of the Extinction Rebellion. The subtitle, Only Nonviolent Rebellion Can Now Stop Climate Breakdown and Social Collapse.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Hey, welcome back to the second hour of the program. We have a special treat for you. Congresswoman Pramila Jayapal, the chair of the Congressional Progressive Caucus, senior whip of the Democratic Caucus, ranking member of the Immigration Subcommittee representing Washington's 7th District in the U.S. House of Representatives, is with us for the hour taking your calls. Her website is Jayapal, Jayapal.house.gov, and Rep Jayapal is her official Twitter handle, or Pramila Jayapal, the campaign handle. Congresswoman, thank you so much for joining us. I'm wondering, first off, what's on your mind today? What are the things that you might want to point out to our listeners or comment about?
Yeah, a couple things. Well, first of all, it's always great to be with you, Tom. In terms of what's on my mind, government funding is first and foremost. It is really pretty unprecedented that we would be in January with a current continuing resolution up till the beginning of March to fund the government. It's very difficult for federal agencies, for workers across this country to know what is coming at them when they can't even determine whether or not their position is going to be funded for the next year. And this is Republican intransigence on refusing to, really not just refusing, being unable to resolve the civil war that they're having within their own caucus from extreme MAGA Republicans who think that they can pass an agenda that is so extreme that their own party won't agree to it. And in a situation where we have Democrats controlling the Senate and the White House. So that's number one. We got to get that done. Number two, we have been, Republicans have been holding hostage aid to Ukraine for a terrible border deal. Now, the only thing that might save us is that Trump wants an even worse border deal. He wants to shut down immigration as we know it. We know that from when he was president. And so even this deal is not sufficient for him. And so it may be that we don't end up taking up this supplemental border provisions, which, Tom, I just have to point out would be the most restrictive immigration provisions this country has passed since the 1930s. It's serious, and we can talk more about that. But what is also not good is that they're holding up all of the supplemental aid, including some things that the president asked for that would help the situation on the border, like increased asylum officers, increased immigration judges to help process people more quickly. But also Ukraine aid and all the other aid package that is part of the supplemental. The third thing I just wanted to mention is, we had this incredible bipartisan victory for privacy and surveillance in December of last year, where I worked with my colleagues across the aisle. I was one of the lead sponsors of reforms to the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act so that the FBI and other intelligence agencies can't spy on American citizens without a warrant. This seems pretty basic to me. It's been a real priority of mine for a while. And we passed it 35-2 out of the Judiciary Committee, working in a bipartisan way. But the speaker has yet to bring that up, even though before he was speaker, he was with us on all of these reforms, but he has yet to bring it up to the floor. I'm still hopeful that we can get some significant reforms so that we don't have the FBI spying on hundreds of thousands of Americans without a warrant.
I wonder if Trump is behind his intransigence because Trump wants to be able to spy on us if he becomes president again.
It's really interesting. Yeah.
It's very strange.
Yeah, the reasons may be a little bit different in different ways, but we did have bipartisan support, including from the strongest Trump loyalists like Jim Jordan, Andy Biggs. These are folks who are, I don't have a lot in common with on many issues, but on this particular issue, we were in agreement. You need a warrant. It's not that you can, in exigent circumstances, there were exceptions to be able to get the information needed, but it should not be that the FBI can just spy on hundreds of thousands of Americans without a warrant.
Yeah, for sure. So that's all great stuff. Shall we start taking calls?
Let's do it. Let's do it.
All righty, here we go. John in Portland, you are on the air with Representative Jayapal.
Sure. Hi. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
I was just wondering. Good morning. I was just thinking that every 4 years we go through the same stupidity of having Iowa and New Hampshire and now South Carolina winnow down the field of candidates for both parties, I'm not talking about this as a Democrat or Republican, when are we going to start thinking about an actual national primary or regional primaries where people who have absolutely nothing in common with people that I know are making the only decision about who gets to go forward and who is a viable candidate for president of the United States? I share nothing in common. I share nothing in common with most of the reports I hear out of voters in Iowa, and very little with voters in New Hampshire.
So let's get the Congresswoman's response. Thank you, John.
No, it's really true, John. I mean, our whole system, you know, I like to think about how we make change as not just changing the rulers, right, the people that we put into office, but also changing the rules. And what you're talking about is a very important rule. I would say the Electoral College overall is also a massive problem because, you know, you have states like mine and yours, Oregon, I think you said you were from Oregon and Washington, where essentially, you know, we really don't count in the way, every voter doesn't count in the way that we should. And so I agree. I think these are big changes that we need to figure out how to make because the country has changed so dramatically from when those rules were in place. And we give enormous, I mean, I think, you know, don't agree with Nikki Haley on much, but I think she's right when she says, listen, you know, this can't be determined. The Republican primary can't be determined already just by 2 states. I think that's true on the Democratic side as well.
There you go. David in Columbus, Ohio, listening to WGRN. You're on the air with Representative Jayapal.
Hello. Hi. Thank you for taking my call, and I appreciate your participation in this. I know you work a lot on foreign policy, but I have an energy question. And I'd just like to know why the Democrats keep supporting nuclear power when it's a complete flop. It fails. It's dangerous, and especially stuff like Diablo Canyon, which was supposed to be shut down, and then they want to revive it with $1.5 billion. I think this is a crazy idea, and I just don't know where their thinking is.
Yeah, thanks, David. You know, I think we're in a place where we're trying to make this giant transition from fossil fuel energy to renewable energy. And I think we've been focused as Democrats primarily on wind, solar, other forms of renewable energy, not necessarily on nuclear. That doesn't mean that there aren't projects still going. And even in this district, I know there's a lot of, in my district or just north of my district, there are projects that are working on nuclear and a lot of people who are pushing that. I think for me, I think about Hanford. I think about the outstanding questions that still exist with nuclear and the problems that are there. I think that one of the big things we need to do is make the initial transition from fossil fuel to other, and then we're going to have to fight around what the components of other are. And I think, you know, you simply don't have the same challenges with, you have maybe other challenges, but you don't have the same kinds of safety challenges with solar, wind, et cetera, that you do with nuclear. I think the question is still out there on nuclear, partly because people are looking to replace fossil fuel energy and, you know, trying to figure out how we get enough sources. But I think we're rushing, people who are already rushing to say we gotta support nuclear projects are not looking at all of the ramifications of that. And we certainly know it here in Washington State.
There you go. Congresswoman Pramila Jayapal taking your calls for the hour.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
And we'll be right back with more of your calls for Representative Jayapal. Stay tuned. And welcome back. Maverick in Edmonds, Washington, listening on KBCS. You're on the air with Representative Jayapal.
Representative Jayapal, good morning. I'm actually kind of working in your neighborhood this week, cleaning up some hazardous waste site here off of MLK Way in Seattle. First, thanks so much for doing these Thom Hartmann town halls. It really, really means a lot to a lot of people, makes you accessible, and I hope you understand that you are very much appreciated for doing that. My question for you today is the same question I asked Representative Pocan earlier this week, and it's kind of a hypothetical, but assuming we win big in the House and the Senate, and I mean big, and we take the White House, and I'm actually optimistic that these things are very possible, if not probable. Could you please outline what accomplishments you could see getting coming to fruition during the next 4 years, assuming that we have, the House, the Senate, and the presidency? And thank you very much.
Great, thank you, and thank you for your work cleaning up hazardous waste down there in my old Senate district. This is my most wonderful scenario. We win big in the House, we win big in the Senate, we keep the White House. The first thing we have to do, and this goes back to my comment about changing not just the rulers but the rules, we need to get rid of the filibuster. And I cannot stress this enough, because so many of the things that we can pass in the House are simply blocked in the Senate. And I don't think that the average voter, I'm not talking about the Thom Hartmann voter because you guys are so smart on all of this stuff, but a lot of people don't understand that the rule in the Senate, the filibuster, which is a Jim Crow legacy, stops us from doing the major things that we need to get done that would actually help Americans feel like government cares about them and is taking care of them, not to mention protecting our democracy. So number one, get rid of the filibuster so that a simple majority in the Senate can pass the things we need to pass. Number two, once we do that, there are a couple of areas that I think we need to focus on. The first is around democracy reforms. I do think that we need to think about the things that, for example, allowed Donald Trump to call out the military. I know that there are some senators and House members, I'm one of them, thinking about this right now. There are critical reforms to our democracy to not allow a president to abuse presidential power. I also think there are critical reforms around voting rights and Supreme Court, the makeup of the Supreme Court, term limits and or expansion of the court that are going to be critical to being able to continue to have the American people represented in these Supreme Court decisions. So that's one category of things, getting money out of politics. I think I said that one as well. The second category of things is all of the rights and freedoms that we need to protect, protecting the right to abortion, protecting immigrants being able to come in with real immigration reform. We have to take immigration reform off the table so that we have to get it done, is what I mean, so that we can take immigrants being used as political tools in elections off the table. So those are critical pieces. The third, and this isn't in any specific order, but we can get all of these things done if the filibuster reform passes. But the third is really around this critical economic populist issues, from union organizing, strengthening union organizing. I sort of think about the PRO Act, which I'm a lead sponsor of, as the minimum here, but there is so much that can be done around really strengthening the ability for workers to organize, around raising the wage to a livable wage, and around providing...
I'm sorry, we're out of time. We'll be right back. It's 19 minutes past
housing.
Okay, there you go. Missed my opening rant today? It's usually published over at HartmannReport.com, where you can read it and share it with your friends for free. Check it out, HartmannReport.com. You know, one of the grand questions that political scientists have been scratching their heads over for years in America is, why do right-wing billionaires fund anti-black history movements? Why are they pouring money into these people? Why are they funding anti-trans movements? I mean, what does this have to do with being a billionaire? Well, it turns out it has a lot to do with it, and here's why. Almost 30 million Americans lack health insurance. 37 million of us live in dire poverty. 1 in 5 of us are illiterate. A quarter of Americans suffer from a diagnosable mental illness and can't get treatment. 316 people are shot every day in America. 44% of us carry student debt. And the billionaires don't want to pay income taxes to deal with any of these problems of society. That's the real issue. If they can get us fighting with each other over black history or over trans people or kids, they win. Then we're not talking about taxing them, raising their taxes to where they should be. There's a whole rant about this over at hartmanreport.com that you can read and see all the stats and all the hot links. Check it out, distillery.com. And welcome back. Representative Pramila Jayapal, chair of the Congressional Progressive Caucus, taking your calls for the hour in a National Progressive Town Hall meeting. And Tatiana in Seattle, you are on the air with Representative Jayapal. Tatiana?
Yes, I'm here.
You're on the air.
Yes. Hi. I want to ask representative opinion about Shama Savant's movement, Workers Strike Back. It's a new movement, almost a year old, and it's about workers fighting for their rights, for their salary, for their so I would like to know her opinion, please. Thank you.
The Workers Strike Back movement. Thank you.
Yeah, well, I'm not sure I know the particular movement you're talking about, Tatiana, but I can say that this is what I was just talking about, right? Like, we have seen the successes of workers organizing, striking, and really leveraging collective power for raises and wages, better working conditions, healthcare, et cetera. The UAW strike, and the movement to push the president of the United States to be the first president to actually go out on a picket line and tell the auto companies that they need to share the profits. They need to share the wealth with workers and need to get a good contract. But not only that, the Starbucks workers, Amazon workers, graduate research students and researchers in universities across the country, healthcare workers. We have seen one of the most recent successful movements for workers striking back and organizing together and leading to wage increases and better benefits for workers in the last couple of years. So a lot of that has to do with the fact that we have a Democratic president and Democrats in Congress that really pushed for the ability for workers to do this and have been doing a lot of work both administratively and legislatively wherever we can, given the filibuster, to strengthen this. So I'm very much in favor of it and inspired by the workers who are organizing and striking back.
Yeah, it was just great. That endorsement from the UAW, too, from Sean Fain was just wonderful.
Awesome.
Bill in Richmond, Virginia, one of our thoughtful Republican callers. You're on the air with Representative Jayapal.
Well, Don, I've been trying to tell you, I'm really a conservative, not a Republican.
Okay, cool. Sorry.
But I tell you, the question I've got is this. On this discussion about immigration and I think both parties are guilty of, I don't know, I guess it's misfeasance, just not doing anything. But it seems like in this situation, and maybe the Congress have explained to me, that all of a sudden this focus is going back on immigration, primarily because what's happened to the northern cities, how that have gotten all these immigrants. And the cost of them. And it seemed like that until it got into that domain, I'd say more liberal cities, all that something was done or is being done. Is that a correct assessment on my part?
No, it's really smart on a couple of places, Bill, because I agree with you, by the way, that both parties are to blame when Democrats, when views on immigration, which have held very strong in this country for the most part, for most of the last 40, 50 years, Democrats, when it wasn't quite so partisan, did not prioritize this issue, did not do the reforms to immigration that we needed to. And then we got to 2013 when there was a bipartisan bill in the Senate that would have made major reforms to the immigration system for the first time in 30 years. And it passed the Senate with 68 bipartisan votes. Hard to imagine in this climate. But then John Boehner refused to bring it up on the floor of the House because he knew it would pass. And Republicans wanted to keep it out there as an issue that they could bludgeon us with and, basically create fear, right? The fear of them, the fear of us versus them. Immigrants are taking your jobs, they're taking your tax dollars, most of which is simply not true. And so that has been the problem, is Republicans see it as a great tool. They don't want to fix anything. You see it right now with what Mitch McConnell said just yesterday that Donald Trump wants to keep immigration out there on the table, doesn't want to do anything on immigration. They have refused to vote even for money at the border that would help modernize the border. I mean, it's really a stunning situation. You are right that it was, cruelly smart of Republican governors to send people on buses to Democratic cities. But I would say that the big problem has been not that people don't want them here, but that there needs to be some kind of coordination and, of course, some resources to help settle people. And the big thing is, let's give people the opportunity to work while they're waiting, because the immigration system is so backed up. I mean, we have 10 million people, Bill, in the backlog for families just trying to bring their adult children in here. If depending on which country you're from, you can wait 20 years. If you want to get a job as an asylum seeker, you want to work, you have to wait a period of sometimes up to a year or more, depending on which country you're coming from, just to be able to work. And you think about Ellis Island, and sometimes I have Republicans who say to me, gosh, we should do it the way we used to do it at Ellis Island. And so I have a little memo I've written up for every one of them to say, great, let's do that. Because at Ellis Island, we were processing 10,000 people a day, and we allowed people to work, and there really wasn't a lot of documentation that was required.
That's how my grandfather got here.
That's right.
We'll be back with more of your calls for Representative Jayapal right after this break.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
The chair of the Congressional Progressive Caucus, Pramila Jayapal, Representative Jayapal, is with us for the hour, taking your calls at a national town hall meeting. We'll be back with your calls for her in just a moment.
Today our book is by Frantz Fanon, and it's The Wretched of the Earth. This is from the chapter on national culture on page 145. It sort of reads like Thomas Paine, actually. Each generation must discover its mission, fulfill it, or betray it in relative opacity. In the underdeveloped countries, preceding generations have simultaneously resisted the insidious agenda of colonialism and paved the way for the emergence of the current struggles. Now that we are in the heat of combat, we must shed the habit of decrying the efforts of our forefathers or feigning incomprehension at their silence or passiveness. They fought as best they could with the weapons they possessed at the time, and if their struggle did not reverberate throughout the international arena, the reason should be attributed not so much to a lack of heroism, but to a fundamentally different international situation. More than one colonized subject had to say, "We've had enough." More than one tribe had to rebel. More than one peasant revolt had to be quelled. More than one demonstration had to be repressed for us to stand firm, certain of our victory. For those of us who are determined to break the back of colonialism, our historic mission is to authorize every revolt, every desperate act, and every attack aborted or drowned in blood. In this chapter, we'll analyze the fundamental issue of the legitimate claim to a nation. The political party that mobilizes the people, however, is little concerned with this issue of legitimacy. Political parties are concerned solely with daily reality. And it is in the name of this reality, in the name of this immediacy which influences the present and future of men and women, action. The political party may very well speak of the nation in emotional terms, but it is primarily interested in getting the people who are listening to understand that they must join in the struggle if they quite simply want to exist. We now know that in the first phase of the national struggle, colonialism attempts to diffuse nationalist demands by manipulating economic doctrine. At the first sign of a dispute, colonialism feigns comprehension by acknowledging with ostentatious humility that the territory is suffering from serious underdevelopment that requires major social and economic reforms. And it is true that certain spectacular measures, such as the opening of work sites for the unemployed here and there, delay the formation of a national consciousness by a few years. But sooner or later, colonialism realizes it is incapable of achieving a program of socioeconomic reforms that would satisfy the aspirations of the colonized masses. Even when it comes to filling their bellies, colonialism proves to be inherently powerless. The colonial state very quickly discovers that any attempt to disarm the national parties at a purely economic level would be tantamount to practicing in the colonies what it did not want to do in its own territory. And it is no coincidence that today the doctrine of Cartierism is on the rise just about everywhere. Cartier's bitter disillusionment with France's stubborn determination to retain ties with people it will have to feed, whereas so many French citizens are in dire straits, reflects colonialism's inability to transform itself into a non-partisan aid program. Hence, once again, no need to waste time repeating, better to go hungry with dignity than to eat one's fill in slavery. On the contrary, we must persuade ourselves that colonialism is incapable of procuring for colonized people the material conditions likely to make them forget their quest for dignity. Once colonialism is understood where its social reform tactics would lead it, back come the old reflexes of adding police reinforcements, dispatching troops, and establishing a regime of terror better suited to its interests and its psychology. Within the political parties, or rather parallel to them, we find the cultured class of colonized intellectuals. The recognition of a national culture and its right to exist represent their favorite stomping ground. Whereas the politicians integrate their action in the present, the intellectuals place themselves in the context of history. Faced with the colonized intellectuals' debunking of the colonist theory of a pre-colonial barbarism, colonialism's response is mute. It is especially mute since the ideas put forward by the young colonized intelligentsia are widely accepted by metropolitan specialists. It is in fact now commonly recognized that for several decades, numerous European researchers have widely rehabilitated African, Mexican, and Peruvian civilizations. Some have been surprised by the passion invested by the colonized intellectuals in their defense of a national culture. But those who consider this passion exaggerated are strangely apt to forget that their psyches and their egos are conveniently safeguarded by the French or German culture whose worth has been proven and which has gone unchallenged. I concede the fact that the actual existence of an Aztec civilization has done little to change the diet of today's Mexican peasant. I concede that whatever proof there is of the once mighty Songhai civilization does not change the fact that the Songhais today are undernourished, illiterate, abandoned to the skies and water, with a blank mind and glazed eyes. But as we have said on several occasions, this passionate quest for a national culture prior to the colonial era can be justified by the colonized intellectuals' shared interest in stepping back and taking a hard look at the Western culture in which they risk becoming ensnared. Fully aware that they're in the process of losing themselves and consequently of being lost to their people, these men work away with raging heart and furious mind to renew contact with their people's oldest inner essence, the furthest removed from colonial times. Let us delve deeper. Perhaps this passion and this rage are nurtured, or at least guided, by the secret hope of discovering, beyond the pleasant wretchedness, beyond the self-hatred, something that redeems us.
Hey, if you like the rants that I open the show with every day, they're typically published over at HartmannReport.com. Check it out. Welcome back. 34 minutes past the hour. On the line with us is Representative Pramila Jayapal, taking your calls for the hour. She's chair of the Congressional Progressive Caucus, the big cheese progressive here in America. And so happy to have her with us. Mansour in Tucson, Arizona. You are on the air with Representative Jayapal.
Thank you, Tom. Hi, Pramila. My question is, how can your colleagues be so heartless about the devastation Israel and the U.S. are inflicting on Gaza and the West Bank? Don't they realize if the U.S. doesn't change course, it could cost them the next election?
Yeah, thanks, Mansour. Actually, I'm hoping to come out to Arizona and do some work out there with you all. My friend Rashida was just out there. I don't know what to say about this. I just recorded a video on Instagram and X about where we are with this horrific war in Gaza and the United States' wrong-headed approach to this. Whether your focus is on saving lives and ensuring a Palestinian state, or whether it's on the safety of Israelis, I think this is just completely the wrong approach. And I was amongst the earliest to call for a ceasefire, but it's lonely in Congress on this issue. And a big part of it is the Biden administration has been opposing a ceasefire, has been continuing to support Netanyahu, despite the fact that Netanyahu has taken positions that are diametrically opposed to United States longstanding policy, whether it's around the two-state solution or even the recent buffer zone that they've been trying to establish, taking away land from Gaza, or whether it's in the West Bank and the settler violence that's happening completely uncontrolled at all by the Netanyahu government. And even the hostages, and I've met with many of the hostages and listened to the heartbreaking stories of not knowing where their families are. Even the hostages are calling for a ceasefire, because many of them, because they know that was the only way that we got some of the hostages released to start with, the temporary ceasefire that we had. So to me, I don't know the answer to your question. I really don't. Courage is slim in Congress these days on this issue. I've never seen a foreign government have so much power into the United States Congress. And the fact that the White House continues to say we don't have leverage when we are the largest backer of military aid to Israel, and we don't put the conditions on that aid the way we do to every other country. And so I am continuing both publicly and privately, many conversations I can't talk about, but with the highest ranks of the State Department, the White House, to make the humanitarian case for, how outrageous it is that we are inflicting this collective punishment on innocent Palestinians. It is not helping us to get rid of Hamas. In fact, war experts have said all that it's doing is breeding the next set of whatever the next iteration is of Hamas. And we know that experts have analyzed the fragments of bombs that have been dropped in Gaza, and the vast majority are coming from the United States. So we are directly participating in this collective punishment of Palestinians right now. And it should be that we are pushing for a durable peace where Israelis and Palestinians can live with safety next to each other. But that is not even really on the table in any real way. So I don't know what to tell you other than we have to continue the peaceful, nonviolent movement for peace and safety for both Palestinians and Israelis. And we have to continue to pressure the White House and other Democrats and Republicans. But, I'm focusing on Democrats because I was hoping that we would be out front on this, to really push back and condition aid, not allow our U.S. aid to be used to bomb Palestinians, and to really pull together a coalition that can look at how we bring peace, which is not through military action. And the war is already widening with the strikes by the Houthis. So I can only say that I'm sorry that this is the case. I am pushing as hard as I can, publicly and privately, and some of my colleagues are as well. But it's a relatively small group of us, given the horror that we're seeing on the ground.
Yeah, well, thank you for that. Janine in St. Louis, Missouri, you're on the air with Representative Jayapal.
Thank you. My question is this. The Electoral College presently assigns each state's electoral votes to candidates based on the winner-take-all philosophy, in most states. Now, it's been this results in some votes being worth more than others. So, for instance, in my home state of Missouri, the GOP presidential candidate always wins. So since 1980, my vote's essentially been pitched, even in years where the Democrat won, like Clinton or Obama. Now, Supreme Court, or SCOTUS, determined back in 1964 that the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment in Reynolds v. Sims basically, let me start. I'm sorry. Like the president, I stutter sometimes too. Let me start again. So the Supreme Court determined that the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment in Reynolds is basically a denial of, the winner-take-all process is a clear denial of the one-person, one-vote principle issued in Reynolds v. Sims. Okay, you can't have one person, one vote if the electoral votes, if you have, for instance, 53%.
So, Janine, what's your question for Congresswoman Jayapal?
Okay. Why haven't the Democrats sued the winner-take-all process as a clear denial of the one-person, one-vote principle issued from SCOTUS in Reynolds v. Sims?
Got it. Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks, Janine. I mean, as I said earlier, we got to focus as Democrats, not just on the rulers, but on the rules. And there are a lot of rules, and this is a big one that is simply, I think, is really damaging us, because I feel it here in Washington State as well, you know. So I think that there's a whole set of these reforms that we need to focus on. Finally, Democrats started focusing on the redistricting process, and you see that we're getting some real wins there. That is focusing on the rules, right? Like, but this is a bigger one that you're talking about. Agree with you, and you know, we have to get there.
Mary in Las Vegas, you're on the air with Representative Jayapal.
Hi, Congresswoman. Two questions, if possible. With regard to the Russian assets that were seized, can President Biden use those assets to give Ukraine money without getting authorization from Congress? And my other concern is the No Labels Party. If it pursues running someone, are they aimed at taking votes away from both sides so that that it could get thrown to the House of Representatives for a decision?
Yeah. Thank you, Mary. On the Russian assets, no, that has to be used in a particular way. It has to be determined by Congress. And it's not going to be sufficient for the aid that we need for Ukraine. By the way, that amount of aid will run out in, I think it's like 6 or 7 months. So this is not it's another reason why it's absolutely outrageous to give in to Republican hostage taking, because these are very temporary things that we're even talking about. On No Labels, look, I think this is a terrible group. They seem to not mind about taking votes away from Democrats. I think it will hurt Democrats more than Republicans, and you can see that in terms of who the donors are of No Labels if you go into that. And the kinds of candidates that they back and support. I do wish we had a multi-party system in the United States. I will say that, but we are not there right now. And so with the two-party system that we have, unfortunately, No Labels is going to be toxic for us being able to hold the fragile coalition together that we need to keep Democrats in the White House to win back the Senate and the House.
John in Long Island, New York, you're on the air with Representative Jayapal.
Yes, hi. Great, thanks for taking my call. My question is about the January 6th committee hearings. And I listened to all the public testimony, and I know you're not a member of the committee at the time, but I was wondering if you could shed some light on what I thought was a big omission, and that was I never heard anything about the January 4th memo by the Acting Defense Secretary Christopher Miller. And I'm thinking that must be fake news then, or maybe you could comment on that. I mean, I know Tom knows exactly what the memo I'm talking about is.
Well, maybe I should let Tom. Tom, I'm not sure. I can't remember.
On January 4th, Chris Miller, the Acting Secretary of Defense, issued a memo to the National Guard telling them that they may not show up in D.C. on January 6th. They may not provide the Capitol Police with any kind of support, including aerial support, intelligence, weaponry, et cetera.
Yeah, no, that was a huge, now I know what you're talking about. That was, I think a huge piece of evidence. I don't know that it wasn't considered by the committee, and I have to go back and look at all the testimony. I know that the case that they were trying to make was really around what happened on that day, but it seems like it's totally linked to that. I know that the Department of Justice, though, I believe that they have looked at that, and that is going to be part of their arguments as well before the Supreme Court.
One hopes. Congresswoman Pramila Jayapal is with us for the hour, taking your calls. She's chair of the Congressional Progressive Caucus. You can find her website at Jayapal, JAYAPAL.house.gov, or you can tweet her or X her or whatever at Rep. Jayapal. We'll be right back.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archives.
Back with your calls for Representative Jayapal in just a moment. And welcome back. Mark in Long Beach, California. You are on the air with Representative Jayapal.
Yes.
Congress Lady Jayapal, I got an easy question for you. You mentioned about the stunt that John Boehner pulled in 2013 when you said that it was 68 to 32. Am I correct?
Correct.
And this is what Mike Johnson is doing now. He's replicating what John Boehner is doing. My question to you is, when the Democrats had the presidency, the House, and the Senate in 2021 for 2 years, why didn't they pass some immigration reform, and we wouldn't have to be going through this?
Yes, this is perfect because, Mark, in 2021, when we had control of all three chambers, you would think we should be able to pass it, right? But you know what stopped us? We passed it in the House, but it went to the Senate, and you need 60 votes in the Senate because of the filibuster. And we are never going to get 10 Republicans to vote with us for comprehensive immigration reform. And I will just say it's not the same as 2013 with John Boehner, because the thing that we are considering today, it is in a way, I understand the point you're making, but it's not the same because the thing we're considering today does not have any of the underlying reforms that you would need to really fix the immigration system. The only thing it's doing is shutting off the right for people to seek asylum, the ability to really seek asylum. And it's expanding the things that Donald Trump put in place, like mandatory detention, which is, by the way, private for-profit detention centers. They all need to go. I have a bill around that. It's called the Dignity for Detained Immigrants Bill. But in addition, it's just expelling people to Mexico. We're going to have a bunch of camps on the other side of the border in Mexico. So this is not solving anything, what Mike Johnson is saying they don't want to do, but they don't want to do it because they just want to shut down immigration, period. So even these things are not sufficient. In 2013, that was a real comprehensive solution. I had to hold my nose at some of the border stuff that was in there, but we were getting these deep underlying reforms that were worth it. And we've already spent more on border security, just throwing money at the border in the last 10 years since that bill passed, with no underlying reforms. Enforcement only does not work. That's why we need to get rid of the filibuster so that we can get this issue done in a real way and take care of taking immigrants off the table as political pawns. And most importantly, fix the system so that we can be a humane country that lives up to our values, that allows, recognizes the contributions of immigrants to this country and the fact that we would be nowhere without the contributions of immigrants.
We just have about 30 seconds. Now that several Republicans have come right out and said, we're not going to do this because Donald Trump told us not to, or we're not going to do this because, as long as the border's a mess, it helps us. Do you think that's going to blow up in their face, or do you think the Republicans are just fine with that?
I think Republicans are just fine with that. But I think it will blow up in their face in that I think we as Democrats have to hammer this home, hammer the point home. And I think the fact that Mark asked the question about why didn't Democrats do this is why we have to keep talking about the filibuster. So thank you, Tom, for allowing me to do that every time I come on. Yeah. Because people are like, well, why didn't you fix the system? We can't without getting rid of the filibuster. Yep. And we have to do that so that we can really bring cohesion and compassion back to this discussion.
100%. Representative Pramila Jayapal is with us. We'll be back with more of your calls for her in less than a minute. Stay tuned. We'll be right back. In fact, less than 20 seconds, I think. Hey, thanks so much for sharing our program and for reaching out to our stations and sponsors and letting them know that you're listening. It really means a lot to us. Welcome back. Representative Pramila Jayapal, chair of the Congressional Progressive Caucus, taking your calls for the hour. Steve in Alamogordo, New Mexico, you are on the air with Representative Jayapal.
Hi, thanks for taking my call. I had a quick question for the Congresswoman. Why aren't the 147 members of Congress, including about 8 in the Senate, why haven't they been addressed by the 14th Amendment, Section 3? Because I don't think the speech and debate clause protects that kind of behavior. I don't think it's like the speech and debate clause shouldn't be covered by, shouldn't cover matters of crime or fraud.
I'm not sure what 147 members, what are we talking about?
I think he's talking about the people who voted not to certify Joe Biden's, and many of them appear to be implicated in planning January 6th. They're giving people tours, stuff like that.
Yeah.
But
that's
obviously not all of them.
That's all under investigation, that we don't have a good system here. It's one of the things we have to change. These referrals go to the Ethics Committee. The Ethics Committee is a bipartisan committee. It used to be bipartisan on ethics in a relatively good way, would call out, but not anymore on January 6th on this kind of issue. They have blocked any work that the Ethics Committee has tried to do. So this really has to go back out to the electorate. It has to go to any cases that can be brought against people. I had signed one of those letters around the tours that were being given. I asked for the Ethics Committee to investigate many of those members, Paul Gosar, Marjorie Taylor Greene, others who were implicated in some things around January 6th. But we don't have a good system. And I think this is where, there were a lot of things that the founders perhaps thought would never happen, or that people would have a certain level of fealty to the facts even, and to the idea of democracy. I just don't think that's true anymore. And we need to have better safeguards in place.
There you go. Paul in Woodinville, Washington. You're on the air with Representative Jayapal.
Yes, thank you. Well, given there were a favorable Democratic composition, what could Congress reasonably do to put checks on the Supreme Court regarding the regulatory agencies, which Congress created beginning, right after the Civil War? But now the court wants to review and possibly overturn the Chevron doctrine, which under some circumstances the court would defer to the regulatory agency. But apparently I think Samuel Alito and Clarence Thomas think that they know absolutely everything about everything, and they should never have to refer to anyone. But this is rightly a political issue, and the Chevron doctrine has the political answer built right into it, because the regulatory agencies can change their minds based on how the political winds go. So what can Congress do to rein them in, the court?
Well, thank you, Paul. This is my bill. I have the only bill in Congress that addresses this issue and Chevron, and codifies our policy around this if the Supreme Court goes the wrong way in Chevron, which I'm very, very worried about. And so it's called the Stop Corporate Capture bill. And I hope that everybody that's listening will contact their representatives and encourage them to sign on if they're not already on the bill. But it would codify the ability for regulatory agencies to make decisions based on fact and not leave it to the Supreme Court, to elected officials to override those decisions. And so I think this is critically important. I hope you'll help me get that bill going, but we can codify this. That's what we should do. That's what we must do. And I'm working with Public Citizen on this. They've been a great ally, and they're helping me, but I need more help to really bring this issue up and make it clear that this is a critically important issue for so many of the things we care about.
Yeah, it really is. Carol in Everett, Washington, you're on the air with Representative Jayapal.
Oh, hi. Thank you. I really appreciate you, Tom. I've listened to you for many years. My question for Representative Jayapal is that what can we do to break the stranglehold of large advantage plans have over our health care system? And this pertains to recent acquisitions in Snohomish County by Optum Care. And do you have any solutions for that?
Yes, I do, Carolyn. This is an issue I'm focusing a lot on. Of course, I'm the lead sponsor of Medicare for All. And I am terribly worried that we're not just talking about, how do we expand Medicare to be the comprehensive system of government insurance for health care for all Americans. But unfortunately, now what's happening is these private insurance companies are privatizing Medicare through the Medicare Advantage plans. It is terrible that they're called Medicare Advantage because a lot of seniors think that this is Medicare. It's not. I have had numerous complaints from constituents who were pushed into Medicare Advantage plans during the open enrollment period and then can't get the services they need, are being pulled in by zero premiums at the beginning, kind of lured in, can't then have their costs go up, don't get the care they need, and can't switch back to traditional Medicare. And so I have been taking on these insurance companies. Last year, we were able to stop a letter that the Medicare Advantage companies usually put out with a lot of progressive Democrats on it and leading it, asking for expansion of Medicare Advantage, which is essentially privatization of Medicare. We were able to stop that letter, and we did our own letter that to the administration saying, we need all these changes. We need to get rid of all of these overpayments, the fraud that these insurance companies are engaging in. That would save us tens of billions of dollars, and it would actually allow us to expand Medicare to include dental, vision, and hearing. Which is one of the reasons people sometimes get these MA plans, thinking that they're going to get some of the gaps that we still have in Medicare covered. So we are pushing back again this year. In fact, I have a letter right now that I'm circulating amongst Democrats, and you should ask, again, your member of Congress to sign on to this letter that is specifically about the changes we need to see from the administration. They can do a lot of these things from the administrative side. There's also a bill around changing the name of Medicare Advantage that I think my colleague
Save
can have.
Medicare Act. Yeah. Thank you, Congresswoman. Thank you so much.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
In addition to bringing you the Thom Hartmann Program here on Free Speech TV and Video Media Online, we also have a whole set of ways you can interact with us and tools you can use to spread the word about the importance of democracy and the threats to it in our republic. First, there's your daily homework. Sue Nethercutt puts together a daily email newsletter that has a link to every story I discuss on the air, so you can find my sources and you can share them with your friends. It's free and you can sign up at ThomHartmann.com. Second, I publish my daily take every day over at the HartmannReport.com website. That's also free if you want the daily 5 days a week rant in your inbox. No ads either. Third, we have the podcasts. There's the free 1-hour version of our daily show that's advertising supported. You can find that wherever you get your podcasts normally. And then there's also the podcast of the entire 3-hour show with no advertisements, and that's available by subscription over at ThomHartmann.com. So check them all out at ThomHartmann.com and HartmannReport.com.
We say fight back!
Our book today in the Thom Hartmann Book Club is The Hidden History of American Healthcare: Why Sickness Bankrupts You and Makes Others Insanely Rich by me. I wrote this book. This is from the introduction, the title, How a Single-Payer Healthcare Systems Helps Stop COVID-19. Healthcare systems can be national security systems. Just ask anyone from Taiwan. From January 20th, 2020, the United States, or on January 20, 2020, the United States recorded its first known case of COVID-19 infection. The following day, Taiwan got their first one, too. By the end of April, over 1 million Americans were infected with the virus. But Taiwan had recorded only 388 infections, and their last case of local transmission was on April 12th. A few had arrived on aircraft from other countries. All were contained by quarantine. As of this writing in September 2020, there hadn't been a single new case or a single death in Taiwan since April. The economy never shut down and, as of this writing, was projected to have grown nearly 2% in 2020. Business, restaurants, theaters, and sports events were all open. Life was back to normal, albeit a mask-wearing normal. And it was made possible by their national single-payer healthcare system and their citizens' willingness to do their bit for the collective good. Back in the 1980s, Taiwan was on the edge of moving toward a democracy after a military coup in the 1960s. And about 40% of Taiwanese families did not have health insurance. If somebody in a family got sick, the cost of care often wiped out that family, and demands for reform were loud across the nation. Yue Reinhardt was a German-born healthcare economist married to a Taiwanese woman, and he attended a conference on healthcare in Taipei in 1989. His presentation impressed representatives of the government in attendance, and while he was still in town for the conference, they asked him for his best suggestion for a national healthcare system. He and his wife went back to their hotel and discussed the issue in depth, finally deciding that a single-payer national system would be the most cost-effective, efficient, and comprehensive program possible. He shared his thoughts with the government representatives, and the next day he left Taiwan to go back to Princeton, where he was an economic professor. 6 months later, though, a representative of Taiwan's government called him to say that they were going to take up his suggestion and asked him to help craft their healthcare program. He enthusiastically agreed, and by 1995, Taiwan had instituted one of the world's best single-payer healthcare systems. Today, everybody in Taiwan is fully covered for doctor and hospital services. Everybody has a driver's license-like healthcare card, which accesses their entire medical history. They can book a doctor's appointment on any computer terminal in the country, and the entire cost of the system is a bit more than 6% of Taiwan's GDP. For comparison, in the United States, healthcare consumes 24% of our GDP. Because there is no insurance company intermediaries sucking profits off the system in Taiwan. When COVID-19 hit, Taiwan chose not to use the blunt force technique of shutting down their economy and locking people in. Instead, they took on the coronavirus with an aggressive nationwide test and contact trace program tied into the National Health Service database. Every infected person was identified and put into a comfortable quarantine, and every person he or she had come into contact with, even very marginal contacts, were also tested and their contacts traced. By April, just a bit more than 2 months after the first case surfaced, the country had the coronavirus isolated and completely under control. By quarantining inbound visitors to the nation island of 23 million, they were able, as of this writing, to keep it that way. Maintaining public health is one of the most important functions of any nation's healthcare system. Because America's is so fragmented, it's inconceivable that our nation could respond to an epidemic, a pandemic, or another public health disaster with the speed and elegance of Taiwan or any of the world's other nations with single-payer Medicare for all types of systems. It's like Stockholm Syndrome, a friend who's a psychotherapist said, describing the way that Americans have clung for more than 5 generations to a for-profit health insurance system, while the rest of the world figured out how to provide health care to all their citizens at a much lower price. People know it and have become familiar with it, she added. They just can't imagine anything else. It's probably the largest con job ever perpetrated on the American people, one that has cost trillions of dollars and millions of lives. It's been going on since the 1940s. If it were a scientific experiment, it would have been shut down by the ethics review panels generations ago. This experiment in providing health care via a for-profit insurance system has led to the deaths of more Americans than we lost in World War II. Every year, over 500,000 Americans go bankrupt, often losing everything they've worked their entire lives for because somebody in their family got sick. That's 500,000 families a year, every year, for the past few decades. And the coronavirus, of course, has only made things worse. Perhaps most galling, this massive ripoff is costing our entire nation and each of us individually a fortune. Insurance premiums right now make up 22% of all taxable payroll, well above what the cost of Medicare for all would be at around 14% when first put into place, dropping down to around 10% within a few years as previously uninsured people get their health needs up to date. As the health insurance, drug, and hospital parasites push their suckers deeper and deeper into our body politic, Spending on health care by Americans went up 20%, 25% between 2000 and 2014. The book, The Hidden History of American Health Care by Thom Hartmann.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Welcome to the third hour of our program. On the line with us, our buddy Phil Ittner, the veteran war correspondent in Kyiv, Ukraine. His video blog, regularly updated, is over on YouTube. Just plug in his name, Philip Ittner, Philip-Ittner. His Twitter handle is Ittner Philip, the backward, last name, first name. And Phil, welcome back to the program. Now that it's kind of official that Donald Trump, on behalf of Vladimir Putin, has told Republican senators that they are not allowed to pass any aid for Ukraine. We're seeing Ted Cruz and Mike Lee and a whole bunch of these right-wingers just fall in line instantly. How is this being received over on your side of the world?
Not well at all. The Ukrainians are watching very closely what's happening on the Hill. They know that this is a partisan battle, and because of it, that the Republicans are putting in front of Ukrainian lives their priority to play electoral politics, and it is not. It's not. They're very smart here. They're very savvy, and they watch very closely what's happening, not only, of course, around the European capitals, but because of the significance of U.S. contributions here, they watch what's happening on the Hill. They know exactly what's happening. They understand completely that they are being played with like a toy by the GOP, callously and cynically, and that while their soldiers and their people, while they're dying, this dithering and these internal politics and the games and the cruelty that Trump is and the GOP stepping in line is inflicting on Ukraine, it's depressing, it's frustrating, it's angering. They're not fools. They understand exactly what's going on. But I mean, look, we had, Tom, this week on Tuesday, a massive attack around the country. I was woken up at approximately 6 a.m. by air raid sirens and anti-aircraft fire. I saw out of my window, I saw an old anti-aircraft system, an S-300, not so old, but old in terms of what we use here for air defense, streaking up into the sky. And it made me think, where are the Patriots? I know there's a Patriot system, missile system here in Kiev, or at least there has been. Now there's two alternatives: either because of the lack of support and the bottleneck that is happening, that they don't have the ammo for the Patriot, or secondly, the GOP has forced the Ukrainians to make one of the most disgusting decisions that I can think of. They have had to decide whether or not to use the Patriots as an offensive weapon on the front lines or to protect the lives of their people in the cities. Those, one of those two options, one of those two scenarios is a reason why we absolutely got shellacked on Tuesday. Kharkiv got it even worse than us. There was an 8-year-old child just pulled out of the rubble of an apartment building that was struck by Russian missiles because they don't have air defense, because the GOP is playing with Ukrainian lives. It is so disheartening, Tom. I tell you, it makes me question a lot of things about, what we want here, what we're doing here. Do we really believe in supporting a nation that is seeking its independence and wants to pursue liberal democracy? Do we believe in these things anymore? Or is it just Trump and his GOP lackeys for Putin? It's very frustrating, and I think you can tell I'm a little bit upset and a little angry.
Yeah, me too. I'm seriously pissed off about it. I think it's wrong. It is morally criminal. and they're not even making any bones about it. You know?
And craven, absolutely
They're
craven.
Like, you know, they're willing to screw with the border. They're willing to screw with Ukraine. They're willing to screw with aid to Israel, all because they think that if they can create chaos between now and November, it's going to help Donald Trump. And because Donald Trump has been told by Putin, no more money, you know, no more aid to Ukraine, please. And Trump is doing everything he can to do exactly what Vladimir Putin wants. You know, I just, it's beyond disgusting. What is this?
The priority is power. It is not governance. I would argue it's not even politics. It's just sheer unabashed power. And we're better than that, in my opinion. I still believe
we should be.
Anyhow, I apologize. You were going to ask it. We should be. You're right. You were going to ask it.
So what is the state of the war right now? How are things going? And
it's not good. It's not good. It's. I mean, the Ukrainians are ferociously fighting. They are losing some territory, not as much as, you know, if they weren't as dedicated as they are to their cause of their independence and their freedom. And recognizing that this is, you know, the most important war that probably that they will ever face in their lives. You know, they're still fighting ferociously on the front line. We had a major news event yesterday that there was a Russian transport plane that was shot down outside of a border city called Belgorod. The Russians have claimed that there were Ukrainian POWs on that plane. But Tom, I have covered and studied the Russians for over a quarter century. It is now 2 days after the event itself, and we have not seen any pictures of Ukrainian POWs that were killed. We have not seen anything to support this, you know, but we saw, you know, the mass media, for example, ABC, and I hate to pick them out because it wasn't just them, but it pops to mind, is that they instantly went with the Moscow narrative that there were Ukrainian POWs. It's far too early to know for sure, but still at the same time, I know the Russians, and if there were Ukrainian POWs, they would have spread it all throughout the dark web. It would have been on Telegram channels everywhere. So I find it very suspect, and I don't believe that Ukrainian POWs were on there. But the Ukrainians, we're not sure if it was a crash, this Ilyushin cargo plane that went down, but it had just been in Iran. And so there is speculation that they were either picking up ammo or drones from Iran, or they were picking up specialists. And Ukraine's intelligence gathering is very good. So they selectively picked this plane to shoot out of the sky, out of Belgorod, if indeed it was Ukrainian military activity. There's a lot going on with the air war. There was an infiltration by a bunch of Ukrainian saboteurs that went in deep into Russian territory physically and blew up a bunch of bombers, a bunch of strategic bombers, and then they retreated back to Ukraine, but sadly lost their commander in a contact with the enemy. They're still bringing the war to Russia. They are still fighting this war, but the ammo, that's the most important thing. The ammo is diminishing and is forcing them to make decisions they shouldn't have to make. They shouldn't have to decide whether or not they can prosecute a war and bring the offensive action to the Russians, or whether to defend their cities. That's not something that should be going on. And it is. And it's because of the GOP.
What about aid from Europe?
It is increasing. The Europeans are stepping things up. It's and they are putting themselves on a war footing. So it's going to be a longer term commitment that we see them ratcheting it up to. The Europeans. The Europeans are moving. I mean, they still have issues. The Slovakian PM said some things and made some comments earlier that he's now kind of stepped back from, and the Slovaks are actually offering to provide. He's done a 180, and apparently they're going to provide more stuff. We talked about Orban last week, and I have to make a slight correction, not a retraction, but The European Union has got a bill that is in a subcommittee that will be then brought back to a vote to deprive Hungary of its vote because Orban keeps obstructing aid to Ukraine. That bill, that legislation is now going to be returned to the general body at some point, and they're going to try and stop these obstructionists, notably Orban, of course.
Right.
But the Europeans are stepping things up. And there's cautious hope from some quarters here because there's so many Ukrainians that want to believe in America. There truly are. And I hear from Ukrainians two things that they want to see primarily out of the United States. Europe is one thing, but the United States is another. They want to see the bottleneck and the gamesmanship and the politics and all the rest of it. They hope for an end to that, but they're also hoping for, and whether or not, by the way, that means a separation of the bill so that the border security, which cynically, of course, we know Trump wants to actually, he doesn't want to solve it. He just wants it to be there for the campaign, but to separate the border from Ukraine, that is an option that I know people who are on the Hill right now trying to make that happen. But in addition to that, there is hopeful movement on the seizing Russian assets and taking funds from Russian oligarchs who support the Putin regime and liquidating those assets or seizing bank accounts and using that immediately now to help with reconstruction and with supporting Ukraine.
Yeah.
So there's cautious optimism there as well. But the Ukrainians recognize that this is a game in the United States played by Trump, who is beholden to Putin. They're just hoping that we can be better than we have been.
Yeah. Well, I hope so too, and I hope
I know.
I
tell them that. Well, when I speak to them, I say that the people of the United States support Ukraine, but the political situation and the way Russia has manipulated the GOP is, and they understand that. They really do. They understand it. But it's a shame, and it's shameful.
Yeah, I agree. Phil Ittner, check out his video blog over on YouTube. Philip Ittner. Phil, thanks so much for dropping by.
Thank you, Tom.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
It's 17 minutes past the hour. We'll be back with more of the news of the day and your calls right after this. And welcome back. Tony in Long Island, New York. Hey, Tony, what's on your mind today?
Hey, thanks for all you do, Tom. You're awesome.
Thank you.
I just wanted to say, how come, I don't understand, why don't we frame what's going on in Israel as a left-right thing? Because it seems to me that Hamas is right-wing Palestinians, and they made this crazy situation and was retaliated by the right-wing Israeli government, and everybody's focusing all their anger on Israel when it's really the right-wing Israelis that we need to focus on. And there's plenty of Israeli and Jewish people that are horrified about what's going on.
Yeah, no, they're showing up in the streets protesting Netanyahu. I don't know if it's been going on the last few days or weeks, but, hundreds of thousands of people were showing up in the streets before. Yeah.
And if maybe we framed it as a left-right thing, that the right wingers are the ones that are causing the problems on both sides, maybe the young people especially wouldn't get so disillusioned with what's going on.
I think it's an excellent point, Tony. And it's true. It's true. We're talking about authoritarian. Hamas is an authoritarian organization. Netanyahu is leading an authoritarian government right now, or an authoritarian coalition. And, it's not doing anything for the people of Israel or for the people of Gaza, or the Palestinians in general. Excellent point, Tony. Thank you for calling and making it. Brandon in San Jose. Hey, Brandon, what's on your mind today?
Hey, how you doing, Tom?
Good. What's up?
Sorry, I tried to get in earlier, but my phone was muted for some reason.
So what's on your mind?
Right. Okay. So just in regards to the E. Jean Carroll defamation case, one of the things that keeps coming up is the fact that he confused his ex-wife, Marla Maples, with E. Jean Carroll.
Right.
And somehow, maybe he thinks that this exonerates him in some way, but it doesn't. Because the fact is, it begs the question, did he rape his ex-wife as well?
Well, Ivana actually accused him of rape in I believe it was a divorce filing. She retracted it and then got a large settlement. But his first wife accused him of rape.
Right.
I don't know. I'm watching the news here. I've got the TV stations here, so I can just keep, in case anything big happens. And apparently, they just took a break in the trial. And Attorney Abba, I think her name is, Alina Abba, Trump's attorney, she just announced that after the break, Trump is going to testify on the stand. And she was asked, is he going to comply with the judge's requirement that he not challenge his conviction and that he not, basically give a campaign speech. And she said, I have no, I can't control him. I don't have any idea what he's going to say or not say. So, it's going to get weird or real, as the case may be, in the next couple of hours. But I don't know. It's just going to cost him another $10 million, it's or 15 this time.
Yeah, either way, the guy's a complete psychopath. And the fact that so many people want to vote him in.
I think actually there's some math here. I think he's thinking that by playing the victim in the E. Jean Carroll case, it may lose him $15 million in the court case, but he will be, I've gotten 3 fundraising emails from Donald Trump now in the last 2 days, that he's probably raising $20 or $30 million off that $15 million fine he's going to have to pay. So I think he figures it's going to work to his advantage. We'll see. We'll see. But Brandon, thank you for the call. Spot on. I'm with you. It's 21 minutes past the hour. I'll be back with you. More of the news of the day and your calls in 60 seconds. Stay tuned. Change starts with you. You can be calling your Democratic or Republican representatives to let them know what you think by calling 202-224-3121. It's the Capitol switchboard. It'll get you right through to them. There is a long history of right-wing, conservative, Republican-appointed Supreme Court justices becoming liberals, or at least becoming reasonable. Earl Warren is probably the best-known example. He was, a right-wing governor of California. He was a hard-ass Alameda County district attorney, and when Eisenhower put him on the court, a year later he did the Brown versus Brown v. Board of Education case. He ended discrimination, racial discrimination in schools, or at least tried to end it. So why are Republican billionaires now sucking up to conservative members of the Supreme Court? In my opinion, it's not a quid pro quo. They're not trying to get specific votes on specific issues. They're trying to prevent them from doing what Earl Warren did, which is waking up and voting for the benefit of America rather than just their patrons. There's a whole piece about this over at HartmannReport.com. Check it out. And welcome back. This is just some amazing stuff. Trump's right-wing allies are plotting the takeover of the European Union. This is John Fetter writing over at commondreams.org. Viktor Orban is holding up $54 billion worth of assistance to Ukraine. And now he's got other right-wing governments, the Dutch or right-wing parties, Geert Wilders, the leader of the far-right Party for Freedom in Holland. He's got Viktor Orban, of course. Well, I mentioned Orban. Right-wing parties that are growing in Finland, Poland, Spain, and Sweden. Again, all of these are right-wing in as much as they oppose further immigration. But Orban is following the Kremlin playbook. And in France, of course, it's the Marine Le Pen movement. So onward they roll. In the meantime, we published I published, however you say it, a new article today over at hunterandafarmersworld.com. And it's titled Visible Filing Systems. In addition to this instant visibility filing system, this is a lesson that I learned. My whole life I've had this problem with filing systems that if I put something in a drawer, it no longer exists if I can't see it. And so back in 1978, 79, I went over to Germany and met this guy, Gottfried Müller, who became one of my mentors. And he ran this big charity out of Germany. And in his office, his filing system was he had this wire rack thing against one wall, and it had all these little trays in it that like you would use for laundry. You know, I mean, they were just wire trays where you could see everything in them. And then all of his papers were in those things. And so he could, you know, just look at his wall and he could see everything, right? And with little labels and things on things. And I was like, holy cow. Because Louise used to make this joke that I don't have filing systems, I have piling systems. I would literally I would organize things in piles on the floor or on my desk. I've got piles all over my desk right now at home. Well, in fact, here in the studio, I've got piles all over my desk. And so, you know, it's like, okay, let's institutionalize this. If this is how we're wired, those of us who are hunters in a farmer's world, and like I said, you'll find this over at hunterindafarmersworld.com. For those of us who are wired this way as hunters, there are actual systems, visible filing systems that you can use and that you can create that help you see things and not lose track of things and not forget things. And so I just wanted to flag that for you all because I thought it was really interesting. We've been, you know, one of the things, in fact, one of the stories is from Martha in Las Vegas, how she uses color coding things, which is, you know, kind of a variation on this. I've been publishing these hunter stories at hunterindafarmersworld.com now for a couple of months, and I've got a whole bunch of them. And, you know, every week I'm going to publish one or two of them going forward. And you know, these are like tips for life, you know, little ways to get around the unique proclivities and brain wiring that comes with ADHD or comes with being a hunter in a farmer's world. And this visible filing systems actually, I think, is, you know, one of the cooler ones that I've come across in my life. So I'll pick up your calls. We can get back to politics and everything else right after this break here at the bottom of the hour. It's 27 minutes past the hour. It's the Thom Hartmann Program, taking back the mainstream media 3 hours a day, 5 days a week, right here. I'll be right back with your calls in just a moment.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
Defense has arrested after Trump gave very brief testimony. Apparently, he didn't blow it up. I'll fill you in a minute. Stay with us.
Today from a book by Four Arrows, also known as Donald Jacobs or Don Jacobs. It's titled Point of Departure, Returning to Our More Authentic Worldview for Education and Survival. This is from Chapter 3, Community-Oriented Self-Authorship. Knowing the power of intentional and unintentional trance-based learning and how the latter can make us susceptible to believing untoward communication from authority figures, we can understand one reason self-authorship is important in the indigenous worldview. When we are in control of our thinking and trust our intuitive insights, our natural trance awareness helps prevent misdirection from external influences. It gives us the authority for what we can then instill in our minds to achieve. If someone such as a trusted shaman or psychologist has, certain skills at hypnosis, we might tentatively authorize him or her to help us form the most effective images, but we do so with full awareness. More important than avoiding negative influence from perceived authority figures, however, is the self-authorship via indigenous worldview that gives high degrees of individual autonomy to people while at the same time assuring that people use their freedoms to help their communities. In the indigenous worldview, the highest authority for all decisions comes from one's personal, honest reflection on lived experience, with the understanding that everything is related. It is this understanding that makes a distinction between self-authorship, as it is generally perceived in the dominant worldview, and that of the indigenous one. Self-authorship is always ultimately in the service of the greater good in the latter. Self-authorship in indigenous ways of thinking comes from knowing that the highest experience for decisions comes from honest reflection on lived experience in light of realizing that everything is related in life, and this interconnectedness must be a part of all decisions. Michael Anthony Hart gets to these ideas about inner authority coming from such reflection. Through inward exploration, tapping into creative forces that run through all life, individuals come to subjectively experience a sense of wholeness. This exploration is an experience in context, where the context is the self in connection with happenings, and the findings from such experience is knowledge. Happenings may be facilitated through rituals or ceremonies that incorporate dreaming, visioning, meditation, and prayer. The findings from such experiences are encoded in community praxis as a way of synthesizing knowledge derived from introspection. Hence, indigenous peoples' cultures recognize and affirm the spiritual through practical applications of inner space, excuse me. Such a holistic understanding of accessing, trusting, and exercising our inner authority is the source of the creativity and knowledge synthesis we need for addressing our global problems. While Ehrman refers to this inner authority with the Cree term mamatawisin, which is the capacity to tap the creative life forces of the inner space by the use of all the faculties that consume our being, it is to exercise inwardness. This understanding is missing from our dominant worldview, where objective-based outward exploration is sought for guidance rather than introspective knowledge development. Dependence on external authority is the rule in spite of the call to question authority that has always resonated on the fringes. Under the dominant worldview, obedience trumps community-oriented self-authorship. Decision-making is rarely a holistic process, nor does it utilize alternative states of awareness, deep reflection, and community praxis. The random quotations below, selected from an internet search, reveal that obedience to authority is common under the dominant worldview. Obedience to lawful authority is the foundation of manly characteristics by Robert E. Lee. All religions have based morality on obedience, Alexander Herzen. Obedience brings peace in decision-making, James Faust. Justice is the insurance that we have on our lives and property. Obedience is the premium we pay for it, William Penn. I was not born to be free. I was born to adore and obey, C.S. Lewis. Every game has rules. Life's a game that has its respective rules. Obey the rules, win the game, Israel Ahavor. A wolf cannot have more than one head, or it tears itself apart, Con Iggulden. From a social dissident on the fringe, Noam Chomsky wrote, any dictator would admire the uniformity and obedience of the U.S. media. From an indigenous-raised Lakota, Oyesa, the American Indianist in religion as in war. Reliance on external authority is not only the bedrock of choices in mainstream society and the main approach to moral development, but it also gives guides jurisprudence and conflict resolution. Authorized punishment or revenge is a primary goal for wrongdoing. Under indigenous worldview, bringing offenders back into community via affected members of the community is the goal. This relational approach expands the circle of land and seeks input from the wide circle of relevant people. Spiritual resources are employed via prayer or song, and subjectivity is as important as objectivity. Hart emphasizes this relationship as emphasizing spirit and spirituality, and in turn, a sense of communitism and respectful individualism. And then he goes on about the indigenous worldview and how it relates to what we would call communism. Point of departure by 4 arrows.
From international trade policy to immigration policy to housing, we've got all kinds of topics. The wars between Republicans and Democrats, the Republican efforts to induce fascism in the United States. A great selection of opinions will be found over at HartmannReport.com. From Los Angeles to Columbia, South Carolina, from Birmingham, Alabama to Baltimore, universal basic income programs are chalking up proof after proof of their viability. Basically just giving people, low-income people, poor people, somewhere between $500 and $1,500 a month, no strings attached, is lifting people out of poverty, getting them back on track, getting them into solid middle-class jobs, helping their children tremendously. This works. Now, we don't have to do UBI in the United States. We're the only developed country in the world that doesn't have a national health care program. Health expenses are whacking a lot of low-income people. We're the only developed country in the world that doesn't have free college education. Education expenses are whacking people. There's a lot we could do. We can subsidize housing. We can subsidize food. We do that with food stamps. We could expand it. There's a lot we could do to benefit from this. There's a whole report about that over at hartmanreport.com. Check it out. "35 minutes past the hour. Let's pick up your calls, see what's on your mind today. Richard in Spartansburg, South Carolina. Hey, Richard, what's up?
Yes, Tom, great show. I missed out on talking to Representative Jayapal, and the question I had for her was, we have so many immigrants that are coming into the country. I remember going to the employment office, and they would have binders filled with employers looking for workers.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't see why we can't connect the migrants with temporary work with these employers, because they're hurting for to get the job done, and they can't find anybody to do the work.
Yeah, I saw an article this morning. I don't recall where it was. It might have been the New York Times or the Washington Post, but about in the construction trades. We have this huge housing shortage in the United States, and one of the biggest challenges to building new houses is we don't have enough laborers.
Exactly.
People don't want to go into construction right now. And so, yeah, it's the problem is that it's against the law for people who are here, even with the permission of our government. There's like 10 million people in this line right now who are here with our permission, waiting for a judicial process, waiting to be determined whether they can stay, and then after that, whether they can get a work permit, who don't have the ability to work, who can't work in the country right now. And that's something that requires a legislative solution, in my opinion.
Why can't we treat them as migrant workers?
Well, we tried that back in the 1950s. Dwight Eisenhower had a program called the Bracero Program, where people would come in the spring and they would work through the summer, the picking season, in the up and down the West Coast principally, and then go back down to Mexico for the winter. And the problem with that program was that it was being run by the employers rather than the federal government. And so the employers would simply engage in wage theft or abuse their workers, or even in some cases, there were numerous cases of documented rapes, where the employers then said, if you turn me in, if you try to complain about this, I have the ability to pull your Bracero card, your ability to work in the United States. And so people just put up with it. And that's why that program kind of went down in flames. But some sort of a guest worker program, I don't think would be a bad idea at all. And we really need to have an honest and non-inflammatory, non-flame war conversation about this in this country. Unfortunately, the Republicans see it as a partisan issue, as something that they can use to help win elections. And so until that changes, we're going to have what we have. Thanks for the call. Francesco in Sarasota, Florida, listening to WSLR. Hey, Francesco, what's up?
Hi, Tom. Thanks for taking my call. Just something unrelated. If people want to see what's happening in the Ukraine, if they haven't seen already, the front line show about they have reporters actually embedded with the people who are living in basements and struggling to survive. And it's just done incredibly well. I mean, it puts you right in there.
Is this new?
With the I don't think it's that new. I watched my son about, I would say, a couple of months ago. So it may be even worse now, but I just thought it was the best. It was just incredible is what it was. So it was Frontline. It was a Frontline documentary, and it was great. But what I called about was I heard today I was listening to a show about Middle East topics, and a representative of some sort from Michigan came on. And you just go under the topic. I consider myself a progressive. It goes under the topic of cutting off your nose to spite your face, progressiveness, She said that she's ahead, and she's very much in touch with the Muslim community in Michigan. and that they're going to do everything they can to see that Biden doesn't get another term because of his support for Israel and his, in her words, disregard for the Gaza people.
Right.
And, you know, these are the things that make me want to tear my hair out, because do these people not understand that Trump would be Netanyahu's absolute blood brother if he gets in? I mean, do they not understand that? I mean, this goes on with progressives all the time, and I don't know whether it's naivete or some form of ignorance or stubbornness. I don't know what it is, but it goes on all the time.
I think what it is, Francesco, is that it is true that Israel right now is illegally, bombing the crap out of Gaza and killing people, killing innocent civilians, and they're doing it with our bombs and with our money. And so I'm guessing it was Rashida Tlaib you were talking about, and maybe not, but she represents Dearborn, which is a heavily Muslim district, probably the most Muslim district in the United States. And people are pissed, and I think they're pissed with some justification. Biden needs to get this under control. Netanyahu has been engaging in partisan politics in the United States for years and years. I mean, he came, when Trump was president, he came over here and spoke to Congress. Or no, excuse me, when Obama was president, he came over here and spoke to Congress over Obama's objections. The Republicans invited him, without discussing it with the president of the United States. It was such a slap in the face to Obama. Netanyahu's always been basically a right-wing racist, in my opinion. And
absolutely.
And he's got terrible approval ratings in his own country, and he's dragging this out as long as he can and as hard as he can, as bad as he can, because it's the only thing that's keeping him out of prison. And so, I think the administration's got to get their act together on this. This has gone on way too long.
I was going to say that Jayapal, Congresswoman Jayapal, she mentioned that she's trying to push Biden, and believe me, I'm on your side. Netanyahu is a fascist as far as I'm concerned, and a racist. I'm just saying she also needs to, besides saying that Biden is not as much as he can, she also has to make it clear what a Trump presidency would mean.
Yes.
And they have, as well.
Yeah, you think things are bad now. I mean, Trump would be endorsing carpet bombing. Yep.
Exactly.
Francesco, I got to move along, but thank you for the call. Your point was very well made. Robin in Kingston, Washington. Hey, Robin, what's on your mind today?
Hey, Tom, I'm calling up with a slight disagreement with you about the health of the Republican Party. I'm trying to see if I can get you to agree to disagree with yourself.
Okay.
I actually think the Republican
Sometimes I do
Party. Yeah, I know. And I think that the Republican Party is actually healthier than you think, and they're doing quite well, but they look bad. But that's sort of part of their plan. They're chameleons, and they think long term, not short term. And what I agree with you about is that Nikki Haley may end up being a stronger opponent to Biden, and I maintain that the Republican Party knows this. And my own prediction about Trump is that he's 70-30. He will not run. He doesn't want to lose again, or he may be convicted. Now, other proof that the Republican Party is healthier, obviously my pet is the Lincoln Project. I call it the Lincoln Trojan Horse Project. There's a website out there called Medicare for All, and it keeps on asking me to support Liz Cheney. Those two things don't fit. Further proof, the 6-3 conservative SCOTUS. That didn't happen because of a dysfunctional party. And probably the big killer of all, Tom, is that the Republicans have schemed a way to get almost all media and everybody just talking all the time about how much disarray and trouble the Republican Party is in. In the meantime, they're behind the curtain pulling things off.
Yeah.
So in any event, that's sort of what I think about it. And I think we need to shift off of Trump, talking about Trump, and we need to talk more, about how to win in November.
Yeah, I'm not disagreeing with you, Robin, or agreeing with myself or whatever it is that your goal was. But your points are well made, and the Republican Party has this huge institutional advantage in that the vast majority of politically active billionaires in the United States are aggressively Republican. They are embracing the Republican Party because Republicans keep giving them tax breaks. And, for people whose entire lives are consumed by greed, everything that they're all about is making another $1 billion. That's a big deal. So, I don't think it would be wise for any of us to underestimate the Republican Party, and whether or not Trump is going to be the nominee and how he's going to do, and if he's not, what he's going to do. That's a whole other question that we'll just have to wait and see. Robin, thank you for the call. We'll be right back.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archives.
Back with more of your calls in just a moment. Stay tuned. So Trump was on the stand just for a couple of minutes. Alina Habba, his attorney, asked him some very limited questions, whether he instructed people to hurt E. Jean Carroll. He said, no, I didn't. Whether he stood by his deposition testimony, he said he did. And he also said that Carroll's allegation that he raped and defamed her was false, which I think he's not allowed to say, but he said it anyway. So, we'll see where it goes. It's weird. All right, let's pick up your calls here. Roberta in North Miami Beach, Florida. Hey, Roberta, what's on your mind today?
That's me. It's the first time I'm ever doing this, but I felt I had to do it in good conscience to put an idea across. I saw a documentary about Palestine, and it was saying that a lot of the trouble now, the most recent trouble in this, is because of promises that were broken by the English government in World War II, that it promised both the Arab people over there and mostly the American Jews and the European Jews the same land. And at the end of the war, you're the historian, any corrections. At the end of the war, Israel got it, the land, and the Arab people were forgotten, and the Palestinians were forgotten.
Well, it's not altogether true. Yes, there were a bunch of Palestinians who were displaced to create Israel, and absolutely yes to that. But on the other hand, there were also, Palestinian. I mean, there's an awful lot of what was Palestinian land has now been subsumed.
It was part of the Turkish Empire, something like that.
Well, it's been eaten by Israel over the last 50 years.
But this is what I want to say. Knowing that a lot of people were disrupted, of course they were going to be angry. I mean, the side that their word was broken would be angry. And I assume that they were not treated as equal citizens since it was considered a Jewish state. So they were like second-class citizens, and I don't think most human beings like being second-class citizens. So the wars continued on, and they have this two-state solution or the one-state solution. So I'm thinking of, you were saying diversity before? I'm thinking of a joint state solution. I'm thinking of...
Well, that's kind of what Israel has right now. I mean,
No, I'm talking about where they both govern.
20% of the population is Palestinian.
No, I don't mean it like that. I mean where they both govern. I mean where both languages are taught in school. I mean where they negotiate as far as how they're going to work with religious places and join it.
No, I get what you're saying, Roberta, but I'm thinking of Alsace-Lorraine, the regions like that keep going back and forth. Like in that particular case, between France and Germany, it's gone back and forth a dozen times in the last 1,000 years. Can you offer any example of joint management of any territory anywhere on Earth?
But what I'm talking about, weren't there joint with the states forming this country?
Well, that's federalism. No, this is one nation. We're not collaboratively governing North America with Canada.
What I'm talking about is one nation, but they should consider both. Make it one, but both. It's both run by.
It's a beautiful, idealistic idea, Roberta. I love the idealism of it. I don't think it's practical, but hey, I'll take any solutions. Roberta, thank you for the call. Not a bad idea. I just don't think it'll happen, but who knows? 49 minutes past the hour. I'll be back with more of your calls in just a moment. Stay tuned. Help support progressive radio. If you're listening to us on a commercial station, call their advertisers and let them know you're listening. If you're listening to us on Pacifica, or one of our many nonprofit stations, please support them when they do their fundraising drives. Thanks for supporting Progressive Talk Radio, and tag you're it. Welcome back. 10 minutes before the hour, picking up your calls here. Tim in Aloha, Oregon. Hey, Tim, what's up?
Yeah, there's really something significant that's happening that the Republicans are doing that nobody's saying much about, and I call it the post-Trump era. If you look at Sarah Huckabee Sanders in Georgia and a lot of the southern states, they're trying to eliminate child labor laws, and they're doing that. So,
they've done it in 3 states now.
Yeah, so what they want to do is they want to create a generation of preteens working for minimum wage who have a poor educational system and that are controlled by the religious nonsense down there. Then they go home at night and watch Fox News, and then when they turn 18, they turn into Republican voters.
Yep.
This is scary stuff.
Yep.
They're understanding this generational stupidity that's going on down there, and they're taking advantage of it. It's as simple as that.
Yep. It's the modern version of the old South. It's not quite slavery, but it is clearly a form of oppression. Most of it being directed toward minorities.
The first 30 years of the 20th century, that's classic, especially when Wilson was president and stuff.
Yep.
And then one quick comment about Trump. The only reason he's showing up there, he wants to show his voter base that he's the victim. You see what I mean? That's all it's about.
No, that's my point. He's raising money on this. If he loses $15 million in this lawsuit, he's going to raise 25 from going, oh, poor me, look at this, they're persecuting me.
And people just don't get it, Tom.
No, they
That's
don't.
the scary part.
Yep, I'm with you. Tim, thank you for the call. Spot on. Diane in Ann Arbor, Michigan. Hey, Diane, what's on your mind today?
Hi, Tom. Say, all these dictators popping up around the world. It's just like the Game of Thrones, the movie. I don't know if you watched it.
We watched it a year or two ago,
They each have their fiefdom.
Yeah.
And I call President Biden every single Tuesday through Thursday to remind him he gave his word to Ukraine to help them in this war.
Yeah.
Last evening, Gretchen Whitmer in Michigan gave her State of the State, and she is wonderful. She shows exactly kitchen table issues. She's always thinking of families and children. She is the greatest person ever. I hope she runs for higher office. She made sure that every child in school gets a free lunch, free breakfast, free lunch, if they want it. She says no child should have to study hungry. And she's just great.
She is one of the better governors in the country. She's
wonderful.
I have family in Michigan, and I get back there from time to time, and they just love her. So,
she's great. If she runs for president, oh my gosh, this country would be something else.
Yeah,
she's wonderful.
She's got a bright political future. I'm guessing if she's going to run for anything beyond governor, it would be United States Senator. But that depends on what's open and when and all that kind of stuff. But she's great.
Right.
So.
She's just that goes to show you vote Democrat, they give. Republicans, they take. Vote Democrat.
That's a great slogan. That's a good one for a bumper sticker for Ziggy. Diane, thank you for the call. Nice to hear from you. Sandra in Omaha, Nebraska. Hey, Sandra, what's on your mind today?
Well, you had a caller earlier that was asking how he could talk with family and friends who are Trumpers. And I got an idea in the sense that most people like to watch movies or TV shows or read books and whatnot. And I would say start out by asking, well, what's your favorite movie? Or even in the past, if it's 20 years ago, what movies did you really love? What did you love about them? Who were the heroes? Who were the villains? Why did you admire the hero? Because heroes tend to always be doing something for others. Villains tend to always be doing something to others.
Excellent
Whether
point.
it's to get even or to get above or to greed or whatever. They're always doing something to someone else. And it may not be anyone that ever abused them at all, but they're doing something to others. And the heroes are always stepping up and doing something for others, whether they ever see anything beneficial for themselves.
Yeah.
And I would say,
I get it. Yeah,
why do you admire them?
It's called the center of good and the center of evil. And when you talk to novel writers.
So what do you admire about Trump? What is he doing to you or to others? And what is he doing for others?
Yeah.
And what's the main basis or reason why he's doing it?
Great
because
questions.
if he's doing it only for his own pocketbook, that's not doing something for
Or for his
others.
fellow billionaires. I mean, that's the other thing is most of these people kind of forget that Donald Trump is part of that class that has basically taken over the Republican Party. Sandra,
and
excellent
it's
points all.
come back to for him.
Yeah, I'm with you. Well said. Thank you. Rich in Indianapolis. Hey, Rich, what's up?
Hey, Tom. Today is President Zelensky's birthday, so let's put him in our meta and thank the universe for President Zelensky.
Wow.
And wish him well.
Yeah, I should eat my Zelensky O's cereal.
Sweet.
Glory to breakfast.
Yeah. He's an amazing individual. He
really is.
I got to hear something about him. I think it was last evening, and he's just transformed from having been this comedian.
Yeah.
And stand-up celebrity.
He's now the Winston Churchill of Ukraine. He absolutely is. Yeah. Rich, I spot on. Thank you. I want to get one more call in here. Brian in Lake Worth, Florida. Hey, Brian, I got about 30 seconds. You got a quick one?
Yeah, hi, Tom. This is just an observation. Ever since October 7th and since the war started over in Israel and Gaza, everybody is really getting on Israel's butt about what they're doing. How come I've never heard one person anywhere ask Hamas to surrender? Nobody is bringing that up. I've never once heard that.
I hear that all the time. I mean, Hamas is just this pure evil is what's going on there. Brian, I got to run, but thank you for the call. I think we all started there, in fact, saying, okay, time for Hamas to go. What they did on October 7th is just, there's no justification for. Anyhow, we'll be back tomorrow. Thank you for being with us today. We'll be back tomorrow, same time, same place. In the meantime, don't forget democracy is not a spectator sport. It does require all of us. So get out there, get active, tag, you're it. We'll see you tomorrow. Have a great afternoon. Be good to yourself and the people around you, and stay safe.
You've been listening to Thom Hartmann. For audio and video archives, visit ThomHartmann.com.
In addition to bringing you the Thom Hartmann Program here on Free Speech TV and Video Media Online, we also have a whole set of ways you can interact with us and tools you can use to spread the word about the importance of democracy and the threats to it in our republic. First, there's your daily homework. Sue Nethercutt puts together a daily email newsletter that has a link to every story I discuss on the air, so you can find my sources and you can share them with your friends. It's free and you can sign up at ThomHartmann.com. Second, I publish my daily take every day over at the HartmannReport.com website. That's also free if you want the daily 5 days a week rant in your inbox. No ads either. Third, we have the podcasts. There's the free 1-hour version of our daily show that's advertising supported. You can find that wherever you get your podcasts normally. And then there's also the podcast of the entire 3-hour show with no advertisements, and that's available by subscription over at ThomHartmann.com. So check them all out at ThomHartmann.com and HartmannReport.com.